order. It's 9:01. I have it now. So with that said, first thing out of the gate, let me do the call to order or the conflict of interest statement. North Carolina General Statute 138A-15 mandates that at the beginning of any meeting of a board, the chair shall remind all members of their duty of conflicts of interest under this subchapter. The chair also shall inquire as to whether there are any known conflicts of interest with respect to matters before coming to the board and reading what's on the page. Do we have any conflicts of interest today, guys? Okay, hearing none, I will look around the room and see that we have a quorum. Attorney will verify that. I think Commissioner Smith is the only person missing today. So quorum is verified, and I will take a discussion of approval of the draft minutes from the July 11th meeting. Any comments or corrections on those meetings as presented in the package? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve. Yes, Commissioner Carter.
Inquire real quick. We made a correction on the air quality minutes yesterday about Commissioner Lyerly. Was that also taken care of on the these minutes? I didn't check it. But...
Yeah, in the draft minutes, it states that Commissioner Lyerly has attended us against the.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. I just want to make sure that got in.
Okay. Any other comments? We'll call for the motion. Mr. Duggan, you want to make the motion? You work hard over these with Lois.
I'll move to approve the July 11th, 2024 minutes as presented.
Do we have a second on that? Commissioner Gibson looked at me and smiled, so we'll give Commissioner Gibson a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody against? It's unanimous. Thank you. In the preliminary matters and call to order here, just a couple things I thought that actually I was going to say some of this back in July, but we had a curveball in July. So I want to kind of go through it now for a few minutes, just for the public interest, I would say. And just a reminder of where we are on a couple big things. Background, North Carolina General Statute 143B-282 outlines the powers and duties of this commission. Part of that, in Part 4, it makes clear that this commission shall make rules consistent with the provisions of the chapter, and that all rules adopted by the commission shall be enforced by DEQ. So we have the authority to make the rules that we make. Within that, and I heard Commissioner King talk about this yesterday with respect to water quality standards in Statute 143B-214.1, we talk about the three things that we shall consider as a commission, which would be the environmental impact, the economic and social costs necessary for the proposed standards, and the social and economic benefits for each of the proposed standards. So there's three things that we look at that against. In the APA, the requirements that we have as far as putting a proposed rulemaking before the public is to provide two things, and that's a marked up rule and a regulatory impact analysis. So that's kind of the background of a lot of things that the public and each of you commissioners have dealt with as we've went through PFAS and talked a little bit about 1,4-dioxane this year as well. So that's the process we're going through. Within PFAS, and I want to start off with PFAS, and I think it's important to reiterate that for everyone and to the public. There's three aspects of the PFAS that are going on right now in North Carolina. The first part is the drinking water standards, and that's with the Commission on Public Health. That's what EPA promulgated back in April. It's those 6 drinking water standards. And to be clear, it has nothing to do with the actions required of the EMC. That's not what we do. That's over in Commission on Public Health. The second part, parts 2 and 3 are the parts that affect us. And one is regulating PFAS in groundwater, which we'll hear a little about more today, and PFAS in surface water, which has also been dealt with yesterday. So with respect to those 2 items before the EMC, there are no federal regulations or state laws requiring us to take action. It's not that we shouldn't take action or we can't take action. It's there's nothing requiring us to take action. So as we evaluate these rulemaking proposals, we're trying to be proactive in them. We're trying to be really some leaders in the country, which is probably appropriate. We don't want to be the trailers, but we want to address what we have. And so When we go to the groundwater PFAS, remember back when I said that our rulemaking requirements require us to have a rulemaking proposal that includes the RA and the marked up rule. That committee, despite a lot of earlier fanfare, got that on May the 24th. At the July meeting, their next meeting, they took that up and they took action to make recommendations to the department. The department came back, as we talked about yesterday, and provided a cleaned up RA and marked up rule in accordance with what the commission requested. And yesterday, that committee, first time back, took action to bring that before this full EMC. Now, I added that to today's agenda because I think it's in the public interest to keep this moving forward as expeditiously as possible. So they made the motion to move it to us yesterday unanimously. I put this on the agenda in case they did. They did do that. So now we'll take the petition to vote for a 30-day waiver and then to vote to move PFAS and groundwater regulation to the public for public review. Okay, so that's what's in store for us later today. Now, back up to PFAS in groundwater and surface water. Yesterday, committee heard that. Now, it's a little bit more complicated path on surface water, but back at the end of June, 2 weeks ahead of our meeting, the department didn't have the OSBM certified rule, but we took it anyway and put that out to public view and to our member review. And most of the members on that committee spent their July 4th reading a pretty long document, a lot of information in that document. We found out just before that committee meeting in early July that changes had been made and the OSBM had just certified it that day of what it was. So the public had never seen that document. Committee had never seen that document in July. Nevertheless, the committee thought it was in the interest of everybody to keep that moving, so there was some discussion held. When we got back, and it's not to point the finger, it's not to do anything, but when we looked at that at the end of the week, what we realized, and that was the yellow version that was given to the public a couple weeks ago, that 2/3 of those pages had changes on them. And that not just the changes could be significant, some were minor, some were major, but all the pagination had changed. And so at that point, I asked the committee chair to please get the committee to go ahead and do another review of what had been not given to us at the time of the meeting, but that we had now had, so that we could get comments to the department at least a month in advance. And Chairman Keene went through it. He consolidated comments, and he did get those comments to the department at the end of the first week of August, a month before the meeting, as I requested, so that we weren't ambushing anybody and we were keeping the progress going forward. And so yesterday, for the first time, that committee went into a relatively long discussion, we'll call it that, about the contents of that rulemaking proposal, okay, for the first time. And so out of that meeting, 2 actions came out of that meeting yesterday, both of which keep the process moving and I think will provide some incremental progress in the short term to keep things going and doesn't give up on the long-term proposition of some other numerical standards that we hope to develop. For the public's sake, I don't know that we will have a new updated rule package back before us in November. I hope we do, and I hope the committee can take similar action as the groundwater committee did. But if we don't get it wrapped up in November, we will definitely have it wrapped up in January. But the department and EMC members have already been talking. I've been talking with the department about how we collaborate, even coming out of this meeting to get that revision, that update done so we can keep moving. So I think that's all important to lay to the table. There's a lot been said about PFAS, and PFAS is a serious concern, and PFAS in drinking water is a serious concern, but that is not what this commission does. What we are doing is 2 things that aren't necessarily mandated, but things that we think are good practice. And we're going to keep those moving forward as expeditiously as possible. And I think the record shows that. The other item, we have another contaminant of emerging concern is 1,4-dioxane. Okay, and it just is where it's at, but this is to give you the schedule as I know it. My understanding was that the department has a contractor that they were working with on some cost estimating. There's also a third party doing some cost estimating on the cost of treating 1,4-dioxane. That's my understanding. And therefore, we did not get anything at the July meeting from the department. on a rulemaking proposal, and you don't see anything on this in the committees in this meeting. That is what it is, but just for the public, it's nothing the EMC's done necessarily. We just don't have the information and we have to wait for it to be ready. I expect that we will have something in November. And we stand ready to work with the department in any way possible to give any high-level guidance we can to make that as smooth as possible. But when we get it, to make sure everybody knows, and I've said this before, we will regulate 1,4-dioxane and we will move as expeditiously as possible when we get those proposals in. So I think that's important to say, and let me say this, there is a lot more good work that the department and the EMC is doing. It is a very broad band of things we're doing. And if you were in committee yesterday, you could hear it. So I hate sometimes for the air to be sucked out by those couple things, but it's important we know where those are and where they're going. And then also to remember that we have a lot of other things that we are also taking on. So it is a pleasure to serve with you 15 people. You are all accomplished in your fields. You've all had distinguished careers, and you're all quality people that can serve in any role in this commission. So it is good to work with you, and I appreciate the volunteer efforts that you're contributing to make the state better. So with that, opening remarks, I'll take any comments, but I really don't want to debate on that. I just really wanted to give an update on where we were. So with all that said, I'm going to move to action items. Action item 1, 2416. Request approval to send to the periodic review of rules report for 15A NCAC subchapter 02R, Division of Mitigation Services to public notice in accordance with state law 2013-413. And I have Kelly Williams on the list for that. Anybody from Mitigation Services here? Okay. I think we can hold this open until later in the meeting.
Yeah, if you will delay consideration, we'll figure it out. Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
At this point, I'll probably rotate that into the appropriate time when Mitigation Services gets here. So I won't wait till the very end, but I will slide it in when Mitigation Services get here. Director Rogers, in your coordination role here, can you make sure Mitigation Services?
We're working on it right now.
Okay, I figured you were. Make sure they get on deck. That's right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is action item number 2, 2417, request for approval of report on quality control measures for Title V air permitting processing pursuant to state law 2023-134. And we heard this, I think, in committee yesterday, and we will hear a similar presentation today, I think.
Right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Taylor Hartsfield. I'm the Deputy Director for the Division of Air Quality. This is going to be a little bit of a repeat of what the Air Quality Committee heard yesterday, so I apologize in advance. Here are some acronyms that I will use throughout this presentation, and okay. I'd like to start with a quick background summary of Session Law 2023-134 that became effective on October 3rd, 2023. Section 1217A through U established a Title V air permit bonus pilot program for qualifying employees who process those types of permit applications. Qualifying employees within the division are to receive these bonuses after final action is taken on the permit application. The pilot program runs from January 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2025, so we're in that period now. Section 1217P requires the Environmental Management Commission to develop quality control measures to measure the consistency and quality of Title V air permit processing that ensures each application is adequately reviewed, and if denied, there is good cause to deny the Title V air permit. The session law further requires the EMC to consult with the department and provide this information in an annual report to be submitted to the chairs of the Joint Legislative Oversight Committee on Agriculture and Natural and Economic Resources pursuant to Section 12.17R. The annual report is due by December 1st, 2024. Section 12.17R states that the report shall also include a list of contested cases where the Office of Administrative Hearings rendered a final decision or order with findings of fact and conclusions of law, or a judgment on the pleadings or summary judgment in favor of a person aggrieved by the department, and an estimate of the resulting costs to the state from the previous year. So as a quick reminder, I'd like to give a brief overview of our Title V permitting section. When fully staffed, there are 28 positions in this section. This includes a section chief, 3 branch supervisors, 4 engineer 3s, 13 engineer 2s, 3 engineer 1s, an environmental specialist, and 3 meteorologists. At the time of preparing this presentation on August 22nd, 2024, the section had 6 vacancies. That is still the case today. This section permits all the Title V facilities statewide in North Carolina. Title V facilities are sometimes referred to as major sources. The Title V program was established by Congress in 1990 as part of the Clean Air Act amendments. The goals of the Title V program include standardizing air quality permits across the country, consolidating air regulations into a single document, and improving compliance by clarifying what facilities must do to control air pollution. When I originally prepared this slide, we had 307 Title V facilities in this state. I checked our numbers again 2 nights ago, and we have 311. So you can see how this can vary from month to month. Also on this slide, I show we had 181 applications open as of August 22nd. This equates to a workload of about 13 projects per engineer. Since this time, we've added about 5 more applications in-house today. Here is a chart of the incoming versus outgoing Title V air permit application trends over the last 9 years. The 9-year annual average of incoming and outgoing applications is 206 and 210 respectively. This represents a very stable Title V program with outgoing applications just slightly outpacing incoming applications. Next, I'd like to discuss the types of Title V permit applications and the public participation process for some of those applications. There are 12 categories or types of Title V permit applications. 7 of those 12 are bonus eligible. In terms of the 181 applications in-house, when I prepared this slide, that is roughly 50% of those applications that are bonus eligible. 5 of these 12 categories are required by rule to go through a public process and EPA review prior to taking final action. This represents about 40% of the 181 applications in-house. The public process is counted towards the total processing days and usually consists of 2 parallel comment periods, 30 days for public comment and 45 days for EPA review. Occasionally, the public process may include a public hearing. This is usually determined by the director due to significant public interest in the permit application. The noticing for public hearing may occur at the same time of noticing for public comment. This may also occur sequentially if significant public comments request a public hearing that was not already planned at the time of noticing for public comment. EPA may also move its review period to sequential if significant public comments are received or if a public hearing occurs, which allows them to review the draft permit after DAQ has made any changes based on public input. This slide demonstrates the trends of Title V air permit applications that have gone through the public participation process over the last 9 years. I want to note that this table has been updated and corrected since the time it was posted for your review, but the general trends remain the same. A vast majority of these applications, or about 98%, only go through a public comment and EPA review period. Over the last 9 years, 12 applications were noticed to go straight to public hearing, and 4 applications were noticed for a public hearing after being noticed for public comment. You may notice that 2021 was an outlier year for public hearings. Many of these were done virtually due to the pandemic. We also just had a coincidence of several high public interest applications in-house at that time. Multiple were for wood pellet facilities and coal ash landfill sites. Also, during this 9-year period, approximately 10% of the 697 applications that went through public process received comments from either the public or EPA during the public comment period. Now I'd like to shift to discussing the current resources in place in our Title V permitting section that ensure quality and consistency in our permits. All staff within the section have access to the following shells or templates for our draft permits or draft technical reviews. The Title V permit shell is essentially a blank permit template with sections for a cover letter, table of contents, and list of acronyms. This ensures uniform formatting, table locations, and section headers for all of our permits. All Title V permits list the same set of general conditions at the back of the permit. The general condition shell or template is updated each time the general conditions are changed, including a version identifier. The latest version of the general conditions will be incorporated at the next touch of a permit for a Title V facility. The permit condition shell or template contains specific permit conditions for commonly used regulations. Some examples of commonly used regulations include our 15A NCAC 02D 0540 rule for fugitive dust emissions, and 15A NCAC 02D 8.1806 rule for prohibition of odorous emissions. Staff can copy the specific permit conditions they need from this commonly used list to ensure those conditions stay consistent for similar sources. And lastly, we have a renewal technical review shell or template. A technical review, sometimes called the statement of basis, is required for all permitting actions. Title V permits have a renewal cycle every 5 years. The technical review for a renewal application is more detailed as the engineer is tasked with discussing every state and federal rule that applies to the facility to ensure or confirm that they are still applicable. This shell ensures that each technical review for a renewal contains consistent content. So when onboarding new Title V permitting section staff, the section chief with the assistance of the 3 branch supervisors makes sure that the new staff have access to the shells that I just covered on the last slide. In addition, a new permit engineer may be paired with 1 or more experienced engineers to be a point of contact for questions. New engineers may have their work peer reviewed before processing or before proceeding to the supervisor review step. Those review steps are all part of a common procedure for processing Title V permit applications that all new and experienced staff follow. So what is that common procedure? It starts when an application is received and reviewed for acceptance for processing. The application is assigned to a review engineer, and if air dispersion modeling was included with the application, that is routed to the air quality analysis branch, consisting of meteorologists for assignment and review. When an application is deemed complete, meaning that the review engineer has all of the administrative and technical information to process the application, the engineer will prepare a draft permit and a draft technical review using the applicable shells mentioned earlier. Then the multiple levels of review can begin. Initially, drafts are shared with the engineer's supervisor, the regional office inspector or permit coordinator, and the stationary source compliance branch. We involve the regional office in the review process because the inspector has physically been to the facility and may identify or catch errors in the draft permit relative to the site. We involve the stationary source compliance branch as they are the group that reviews source testing and continuous emission monitoring systems or SIMs that may be relative to that facility. The applicant and consultants usually review the draft documents after internal DAQ staff have reviewed them. However, if timing of permit issuance is a concern, we will share drafts with all parties at the same time. The applicant and consultants are also contacted throughout the drafting phase regarding any questions or additional information requests that the review engineer may have. Throughout this entire process, all comments are collected, reviewed, and modifications to the draft documents are made if necessary. Once draft documents are thoroughly reviewed by multiple parties, they can proceed to a public participation process if applicable. As a reminder, this may include a 30-day public comment period, 45-day EPA review, or a public hearing. Now I'd like to shift to share how the EPA reviews the North Carolina Title V permitting program. EPA's federal oversight of the Title V permitting programs began as a result of the recommendations from a 2002 Office of Inspector General audit. This led to EPA development of an action plan for performing reviews of each state and local air pollution control agency's Title V permitting program, beginning in federal fiscal year 2003. North Carolina's Division of Air Quality has been evaluated 4 times since the OIG audit, occurring in 2005, 2010, 2014, and most recently in 2021. The 2021 evaluation consisted of reviewing our staffing resources, management support, Title V revenues and expenses, public participation plans, environmental justice reviews, permit issuance rates, and a detailed review of previously issued permits. The results of the 2021 evaluation by EPA speak to the effectiveness of the quality control measures already in place, the quality of the staff, and the quality of work products from our Title V permitting program. EPA acknowledged that DAQ has qualified and experienced staff and management that are very knowledgeable, professional, and dedicated to their mission. EPA commended DAQ for their enhanced public participation process, including tools for meaningful engagement with the public and communities. EPA noted that DAQ has an excellent record of timely issuance of initial permits and significant and minor modifications. EPA stated that DAQ has an excellent grasp of Title V requirements and is continuously working to find impactful ways to increase their ability to meet all varied program elements. Lastly, EPA shared that Title V permits are generally complete and well-written. In addition to these periodic evaluations, there are other ways that EPA has oversight of DAQ's Title V permitting program. For example, we participate in annual permitting program oversight strategy meetings. This last occurred in fall of 2023 and is expected to occur again this fall. EPA and DAQ participate in quarterly check-in calls. And lastly, DAQ submits semi-annual Title V operating permit systems or TOPS reports that are due every January and July. Our last TOPS report was submitted on July 26, 2024 for the January through June 2024 period. As I mentioned early on in this presentation, Section 12.17R of the Session Law states that the annual report for the Title V Air Permit Bonus Pilot Program shall include a list of contested cases where the Office of Administrative Hearings rendered a final decision or order with findings of fact and conclusions of law, or a judgment on the pleadings or summary judgment in favor of a person aggrieved by the department. Each Title V air permit includes an attachment to the cover letter highlighting the rights of a permit applicant, permittee, or other persons aggrieved to file a contested case regarding DAQ's final action on an air permit application. The attachment includes general filing instructions conforming to North Carolina General Statute 150B-23 to be filed with the Office of Administrative Hearings. I want to emphasize to you all that this process is very seldom happens due to DAQ's quality control measures already in place. Since 2015, or over the last 9 years, only 4 or 0.2% of the total 2,045 Title V air permits have been challenged. In those very limited 4 instances, all were voluntarily dismissed. I also want to mention that there is a process by which a party can submit a Title V petition to EPA regarding DAQ's final action on an application. In the last 10 years, there have been 10 such petitions, with EPA's final decisions on 4, and the remaining 6 are still pending. In all 4 cases that EPA has decided upon, the petitions were dismissed and DAQ's Title V permit was upheld. As I approach the conclusion of this presentation, I want to reiterate that DAQ's Title V permitting section employs quality control measures aimed at promoting quality and consistency in the Title V permitting process and ensures each application is adequately reviewed, and if denied, there is good cause to deny the air permit. Focusing on that last part, I want to share that permit denials are very rare, more so than permit challenges. This is because Title V permit applicants are unlikely to submit an application that cannot demonstrate compliance with all applicable laws and rules. Rule 15A NCAC 02Q 0518A addresses this infrequent occurrence already by giving the DAQ authority to deny a permit application when necessary to carry out the purposes of General Statute 143, Article 21B, and the Federal Clean Air Act. When permit applications are incomplete, DAQ does not deny the permit, but instead works with the applicant to obtain the missing information. Over the last 10 years, we could only recall one instance of a DAQ permit being denied. This was actually not for a Title V facility, but a synthetic minor facility. This denial was due to an air dispersion modeling analysis that showed the emission sources as represented in the facility's application would cause violations of the nitrogen dioxide and sulfur dioxide 1-hour National Ambient Air Quality Standards, or NAAQS, beyond the property boundary. As a result of the denial, the facility submitted a new application with changes to demonstrate that it could model compliance with all applicable NAAQS, and their synthetic minor permit was ultimately issued. So before going on to the next slide, which contains the recommendation for the Environmental Management Commission, I want to share how we got to this recommendation. After DAQ carefully considered the language of Session Law 2023-134, we approached the AQC chair and vice chair to discuss how to best proceed with Section 12.17P's charge to the EMC to develop these quality control measures. Through the guidance of the AQC chair and vice chair, DAQ was asked to summarize all of the material that has been presented today into what would eventually become the draft quality control measures report that was circulated with the full EMC for review and comment. DAQ only received a few comments from Commissioner Tweedy that were shared with the AQC chair and vice chair. One of his comments asked for approximate percentages relative to how many Title V permit applications receive public comments and how many final actions lead to permit challenges. As a result, we approximated that 10% of Title V permit applications receive public comments and added that statistic that 0.2% of permits issued in the last 9 years were challenged to the draft quality control measures report. So after going through that review process with the full commission, the Division of Air Quality recommends the following. The director recommends that the EMC approve the report on quality control measures for Title V air permit processing pursuant to Session Law 2023-134, Section 12.17P. And real quickly, I just want to show a timeline of next steps as required by the session law. We hope that we will have EMC's approval of the quality control measures report for incorporation into the department's initial annual report that is due to the Joint Legislative Oversight Committee on Agriculture and Natural and Economic Resources by December 1st. On June 30th of next year, the Title V Air Permit Bonus Pilot Program will end, and the final annual report will be due by December 1st, 2025. So here is my contact information, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Go to the Air Quality Committee Chair for Commissioner Carter for your comments. I know Vice Chair Lyerly had some information he was looking for yesterday, so he may share, but I'll go to you first, Commissioner Carter.
Okay,
Chair.
Well, I'm just going to thank Deputy Director Hartsfield. She did an excellent job both today and yesterday in reporting on this. I think it's, they've done a very good job on this report and the recommendations therein. And the committee voted unanimously to recommend it to come forward to the commission today for approval. And I'll turn it over to my Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair Carter. Again, I commented yesterday that the inclusion of the quantitative metrics for assessment were really excellent. I think Commissioner Tweedy had made that recommendation. That really helped to provide assurance that it wasn't just subjective opinions about the performance of the group. We really saw, really exemplary metrics of activity, very, very low rates of challenges, and a 100% success rate in supporting the data to make those decisions. So I thought it really reflected well on the organization, and the assessment of the organization was done in I think, a very superior fashion.
Thank you.
Did you have any progress on the numbers we were talking about yesterday in that 45-day? Did you pull those down?
I think that was related to Carrie Pickett's presentation.
It was related to Carrie Pickett's, wasn't it? So, long
No
day
problem, but
yesterday,
we are
long day.
working on that, absolutely.
Very day. Sorry about that.
That's all right?
Questions for staff or other EMC members? Yes, Commissioner Bailey.
Thank you. Well, again, I wanted to say that was a very complete report and thorough, and we know our applications are being processed in a very technical way. So great job on that. I just have it's just out of curiosity, when are the bonuses awarded? The program ends June 25th.
Mhm.
So what's the
we've been,
timeline?
yeah, we've been issuing on the schedule outlined by the session law at the end of each quarter that the bonus program's been in place. So we've issued bonuses for quarters 1 and 2 of 2024. And we're in the middle of quarter 3 right now. So that'll wrap up at the close of this quarter on September 30th. So I've got information on bonus amounts if it's of interest.
Well, how many people are getting bonuses, like out of total number of engineers?
I don't have that particular statistic on hand. I do know that it represents a little more than half of the engineers have received bonuses. Like, for example, in quarter 1, there were a total of $24,400 in bonuses issued for 18 eligible application types. So, and then those were spread out across different engineers. But there are some engineers who have not received bonuses and others who have.
Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry.
Mr. Gibson, yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, since this is a pilot program, is there going to be a decision made as to whether it should be continued? And if so, what's the basis for that decision?
We have not heard any information about that at this time.
Are you going to evaluate the effects of the pilot program on like processing times or?
Yeah, that is actually part of the December 1 report, is that we have to provide information on kind of like before implementation of the bonus pilot program, what were the average processing times for the different types of applications, and then evaluate how that has changed with the implementation of the bonus pilot program. So.
Seeing no other questions, I'll just say, I don't know the intent of the legislation either. Usually, if you're given a bonus for going faster, they want more to go faster, or maybe it's to keep things as they are. But we have a very stable program. It appears to be a very quality program. Ours is not to get involved in the bonuses or how fast or how slow, but just to do the quality control measures. And I think Chair and Vice Chair have been instrumental in doing that. So I think we've answered the mail in that regard, but I will give it to Commissioner Carter as the chair to present a motion.
Yes, sir. I move that the commission approve the report as presented to us today.
And let me clarify this before we get a second on that. This is not rulemaking, so a 30-day waiver is not necessary. That's more for the
Correct.
public than this commission. I know commissioners understand that, but this is a report, not a rulemaking, so there is no 30-day waiver from yesterday. Do we have a second on the motion? Commissioner Weiss.
I second the motion.
Okay, very good. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think mitigation services is here now, as I saw him walk in, so let's let the slides change order here. Give just a minute or two. We won't take a break, but good time to sip on some coffee for everybody. Mitigation services, are you ready? Whoever's here. Yes. Voila. Okay, so this is action item 1 that we just delayed until they arrived. 24-16, request approval to send to the periodic review of rules report for 15 AC NCAC subchapter 02R of the Division of Mitigation Services, public notice in accordance with Session Law 2013-413.
Yes, my apologies for the delay. I keep learning that things don't always unfold as I expect, and it's humbling, and I appreciate your understanding and your patience, which is
That could be traffic or home or work or
lots
anything.
of things
couldn't
are
it?
out of control, mine and yours, so.
We have a hard time here. 15 minutes makes a big difference. for
Yeah,
all the
well,
commissioners, too.
now that my blood pressure's elevated, let's,
We don't want you to have elevated blood pressure.
oh, it's good, it's invigorating. Okay, so we are here for the review and readoption of the subchapter 02R rules. The Division of Mitigation Services rules were readopted in 2018 last. DMS is recommending that the 9 rules in this subchapter be given an initial determination of necessary. The 9 rules in 15A NCAC subchapter 02R govern the operation of the DMS inlet fee mitigation programs, which include the basin-wide restoration planning, compensatory mitigation as it relates to watershed planning, and the calculation of the in lieu fee rates for stream, wetlands, riparian buffer, and nutrient offset credits. So here's the schedule so far. In July, we came to the Water Quality Committee, and they approved to proceed to the commission with these determinations. Here we are to request approval of the determinations and request approval to go to a public comment period. If approved, the public comment period would expected to be from September to November. And then we would return in January 2025 to request approval of the final determinations and any comment responses that are required. And then in March 20th is the deadline to file the report to get on the RRC agenda for April. And so our request is for the commission to approve to proceed to a 60-day public comment period with the rule report for 15A NCAC 02R with the initial determinations of necessary.
Okay. So a reminder to all, this is just the first step, that bucket list of necessary and unnecessary in the rules review and readoption process. So this has nothing to do with what the actual rules will look like as much as the initial determination that eventually gets to RRC to get on the schedule and their approval. So any questions of staff for this? Okay. With that, let's go on to committee.
Yes, it was at Water Quality Committee
Yeah, so
in July.
Commissioner King, did this come to your committee?
It is.
I have a motion from you, Mr. King, to
Certainly. Be glad to make a motion. Request approved to proceed 60-day comment period with the rule report for 15A NCAC 02R with an
Okay.
initial termination of necessary.
Okay, so it's come through committee, it's been approved, it's got a motion on the table, do I have a second? I'm gonna call you Commissioner Bill. Commissioner Yarborough, seconds the motion, any discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any approved? And it's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Blood
Thanks
pressure
again.
down now, everything went good. No
I'm
worries up there.
moving forward. Thank
Okay.
you.
Have a good day.
So we'll move now to agenda item 3, and that'll be Karen Higgins, and she will have the back end of the water quality rules that she presented probably 2 meetings ago. Now that the determination's been done and moved through comment, I believe.
I didn't find anything back here yesterday.
All right. Good morning, Karen Higgins, DWR Water Planning Section.
as we just heard, this is part of the periodic review. A reminder, there are two buckets, necessary and unnecessary. Necessary rules will go through readoption. Unnecessary rules get removed from the administrative code by the codifier. In March of 2024, you all approved 4 subchapters of water quality rules and division of waste management rules to proceed to public notice. That comment period ran from March through May. We received 2 public comments. One comment that we received was from Dr. Rubin, who's a former EMC commissioner. And his comment was not to a specific rule, but just a broad statement that most of the rules are necessary and essential. And so the recommended response is that we appreciate Dr. Rubin's comment. The next comment came on a specific rule, asking for a specific change to the rule language. As Chair Solomon said, this is not when we are editing the rules, this is just buckets. So our suggested response is that the comment requesting a change will be considered during the rule readoption process. So as a reminder, you all have each of the subchapters as a report and as attachments to your agenda. The columns that you see up here are what are filled out. The comments to the left of the red box are what went out to public notice. The new columns are in the red box on the right. I realize this is really small, but one of the columns is just, is there a public comment received? And the answer is yes for all the rules. And then the agency determination as to necessary and unnecessary for each rule. So just a summary, there's a lot of rules in these 4 subchapters. So for the 2B surface water and wetland standards, we recommend 114 rules is necessary, 0 is unnecessary. This is the same as what went out to notice. For chapter O2H, the procedures for permits, we recommend 112 rules is necessary, 3 is unnecessary. The O2T rules, which are waste not discharged to surface water, there's 98 rules listed as necessary, none as unnecessary. And finally, the O2U, which is the reclaimed water rules, we have 33 rules categorized as necessary and 0 as unnecessary. And there is a note, just as a reminder, for which 3 rules in the O2H subchapter are listed as unnecessary. The reason those are listed as unnecessary is the authority for those particular rules was rescinded by different session laws passed by the General Assembly. So as far as next steps, pending your approval of the reports today, we are to file with the Rules Review Commission no later than September 20th. It'll be heard before the RRC in their October meeting. The RRC is who actually submits the final report to the legislature. There's a legislative committee that makes the final decision. Once the report is final, then we move into the readoption schedule and start through that process. So with that, we request approval of the final determinations and responses to public comments for the 2024 periodic review of rules reports for 15A, NCAC, O2B, O2H, O2T, and O2U. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Initial question, we got a comment that takes future action. I'm going to assume, but you'll tell me yes, that you have a system for that, but you have a way to keep that comment and track it so that we can consider, I don't want to lose it, right? You've heard me say this before in this long process.
It's been sent to the program staff and they're aware of the comment, and it'll be considered as we move forward. Absolutely.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for staff? Commissioner King, do you have a motion?
Yes, sir. Motion, and before that, though, thank the department, Karen. She's been on a bucket list a long time, done a very good job putting all this together and her support. Yes, we move that the DEQ request be approved for the final terminations and responses to the public comments for the 2024 periodic review of rules reports for 15A NCAC, O2B, O2H, O2T, and O2U.
Okay, do we have a second? Commissioner Bailey?
most.
Just quick on you there, Commissioner Ellison. Mr. Bailey seconds. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? It's unanimous. Motion passes. Thank you, Karen. We'll take a break after this next action item, but action item number 4 is the Nathaniel Thornburg request for approval to proceed to public notice and hearing with, I'll just call it the 2T rules for right now and let you deal with it from there.
Good morning, Chairman Solomon and members of the commission. My name is Nathaniel Thornburg, and I'm the supervisor of the non-discharge branch in the Division of Water Resources. Today, I'll be talking to you about the implementation of the Session Laws 2023-55, -134, and -137. And today's presentation is about the correction of 15A NCAC 02T .0114, and this is wastewater design flow rates. So back in May of 2024, the EMC voted to proceed to public notice and hearing for the amendments to 02T 0114 and 02T 0118 pursuant to the 3 session laws. The wastewater design flow rates, the legislature established 75 gallons per day per bedroom for wastewater systems serving 2 or more dwelling units. The language that was presented to the EMC erroneously removed wastewater design flow rates for systems that serve a single dwelling unit. Regarding the 2T 0118 demonstration of future wastewater treatment capacities, there are no changes in today's presentation based on what you approved in May. On your screen, highlighted in red at the top, that is the language that was erroneously removed from the 2T language back in the May EMC meeting. And what we have proposed is to move it to the end of paragraph B as item 3. And what this does is it reestablishes that for wastewater systems that serve 1 dwelling unit, the flow rate shall be 120 gallons per day. What we've also done with these changes is propose to make some modifications to help explain the intent of the legislature. And what we have highlighted in red is that for item B1, this is applicable to current permittees. And then in item B2, that rule is applicable to new applicants or to permittees that are modifying their existing permit. And finally, the last change that's on this proposed change on this rule is to clarify that permittees are still allowed to request flow reductions below 75 gallons per day. The way that the rule is currently written as proposed by the legislature, it indicates that the minimum they can do is 75 gallons per day, which would eliminate the ability for our permittees to request a flow reduction. Another change that was made in 2T 0114 paragraph E is to just clarify that the daily design rates for residential properties is for serving 2 or more dwelling units. And that would change it from 120 gallons per day to 75 gallons per day. The tentative rulemaking schedules on your screen. Today we're requesting that the EMC approve the language so we can move forward with a comment period in November that would have an earliest hearing in mid-November and the period ending in the comment period ending at the end of December. Looking for effective date pending legislative review in 2026.
Nathaniel, real quick.
Yes, sir.
Your first line there is not what's reflected in the agenda item. That should say and regulatory impact analysis in the agenda item. So that when we make this motion, it will include that, which is proper here. It's just the RA was left off the agenda item. So I just want to clear that for Commissioner King. I believe our attorney's already talking to you about that. So, okay, please proceed forward, but you have it right on the slide.
Thank you, Chairman Solomon. So to recap, in May, the EMC voted to proceed to public notice for amendments to the 2 administrative codes through the 3 session laws. This action today will modify the 2T 0114 action that was approved in May, and then the regulatory impact analysis has been revised and resubmitted, and it includes the text edits to that rule. So the Division of Water Resources requests that the Environmental Management Commission approve the request to proceed to public notice and hearing for the proposed amended rules 15A NCAC 02T.0114 and 15A NCAC 02T.0118 pursuant to Session Law 2023-55, Session Law 2023-134, and Session Law 2023-137.
Okay, so comments from me, this could have been evaluated back then as just a technical correction, but I think Director Rogers and I met and said it was better to take it back through committee and the full EMC. We didn't want to go out to public hearing with something that we knew had a big gap in it or had mistakenly been taken out. So we've taken a little bit of extra time to do that. So I don't think this has been changed really anywhere from where y'all have approved it before. But with that said, we need to go through the proper procedure. So Commissioner Keen, any questions of staff? Any questions of staff?
Just one quick, for clarity, OSBM approved, RIA
Yeah, they've
is
approved it.
attached.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
And yes, it's been approved.
Okay, so hearing no other questions, Chairman Keen, do I have one? Commissioner Gibson?
Yes, I'm just wondering, I didn't see in the regulatory impact analysis, and apologies if I missed it, but how will this change affect the risk of septic system failures? Presumably, if these are serving 2 or more homes, they're septic systems or small package plants. Have you looked at the probability of failure of those systems?
The rules that, I guess lowering it to 75 gallons per day, that's the question, how it could
Yeah, how is
potentially
that
impact.
going to affect the risk of septic system failures?
So what we've experienced, it's not necessarily a septic system. These rules are for facilities that discharge their treated wastewater effluent, or for non-discharge facilities, like in my program, where they would treat and then either irrigate or infiltrate the water onto the land surface. And what we've experienced in my time with the state is this is geared towards the subdivisions that we have. They're not 2, 3, 4 facilities. It's more for facilities that serve 30 and higher, up into the hundreds.
Okay.
So the 75 gallons per day is acceptable in my mind because you're equalizing the flow over the residences
Right,
in the
I thought you-
subdivision.
Okay, I was confused. So this is like building new homes in an existing subdivision and hooking them into the existing treatment system?
It can be that, and it can be just entirely new subdivisions themselves.
Right. But you wouldn't have, if you had a very small subdivision, then this might not be adequate to balance out the risk of overwhelming the system, right? So,
In my professional opinion, I would say that it is, based upon the number, if you're looking at 2 houses, that could potentially be an issue, which is why we've wanted to have the 120 for a single residence, because
Right.
they do not have the equalization
right.
that's afforded.
And even 2 wouldn't have that. There's not enough to
But in
balance.
in my experience, I've never seen that, having a 2 residence subdivision.
Right. So this wouldn't apply to just, a couple of houses built on a lot. I guess that's where I'm confused.
The way that the legislature is provided is that if there is a wastewater treatment system that's serving 2 or more residences, so hypothetically, yes, it can be for 2 residences, where it'd be 75 gallons per day per bedroom.
And has there not been any thought to saying that making the rules a little bit more nuanced so that the design flow rates really depend on the number of homes in the subdivision? So you can minimize that risk? So, let's say the 75 would apply if you've got 30 or more homes.
Mhm.
But if you've got fewer than 30, maybe there'd be higher design flow rates.
I understand that, but I don't think that was our charge from the legislature.
Okay.
And we were given the directive through the session law of 75 gallons per day for treatment systems serving 2 or more residences.
So you don't have a choice in the matter? I guess I'm just confused about that.
I'm doing what the session law requires.
Well, yeah, and just to elaborate, this is more for planning and design. So as these facilities, if they were to get ahead of schedule and they're flowing more than they're supposed to, then there'd be another set of regulations for that they'd have to expand those facilities or improve those facilities. So this is really for the out front. How do you pencil that in? And the numbers nationally show that what actually flows and what actually has been planned in the past is there's a gap there. There's a timing gap. So that's what we got. So I think there was some motions to make this lower and some to make it, keep it higher, but this is where it settled in on. And it's probably appropriate. It is appropriate in my opinion too, so. Okay, Director Rogers, do you have a comment? Okay. Okay, any more questions for staff? Okay, hearing none. Do we have a motion on this?
Yes, the Water Quality Committee is going to move that this request from DWR be approved to send to the Environmental Management Commission for their approval to request to proceed to public notice and hearing for the proposed amend rules 15A NCAC 02T .0114 and 15A NCAC 02T .0118 pursuant to SL Statute Law 2023-55, SL 2023-134, and SL 2023-137 with the accompaniment of the OSBM approved RIA.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Commissioner Ellison, as you move to the microphone, you'll second.
Read it.
Any discussion on the motion? Okay, hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? It's unanimous. Motion carries. All right, let's take about a 10-minute break until 10:15 and we'll realize. Commissioner Yarborough, always, I'm kidding with you, I'm kidding, I'm kidding. I had Commissioner Keen right there for a second, didn't I?
They just remembered.
Let me give Commissioner Keen a minute. You see? He'll be here. There he is. Okay, resuming the agenda, we'll go to action item 5, item number 2420, request approval for the 2022-2024 biennial report on the progress in developing and implementing basin-wide water resources management plans to the Environmental Review Commission. And Michelle has that. Good to see you again.
Yeah. Good morning, Commission. As Mr. Chair Solomon said, I'm Michelle Riquet in the Division of Water Resources in the Basin Planning Branch. The presentation you're going to see today is very similar. Actually, it is pretty much the same presentation that the Water Allocation Committee saw yesterday. And it is to the biennial report to the Environmental Review Commission on the progress in developing and implementing our basin-wide water resource management plans, or basin plans for short. So today we'll cover the purpose of the report, our progress on developing and implementing our basin plans, as well as the hydrologic models, and then we'll conclude with some statewide numbers. Per statute, the Commission and the Department are to report on or before November 1st of even-numbered years on the progress in developing and implementing basin plans. The report should include information about public involvement and public education in connection with the developing of the plans, and a statement on water quality and quantity identified in the course of preparing those plans. Per statute 143-255P, the department is also required to report on the development of hydrologic models by November 1st, and the statute directs the department to include that report in with the development of basin-wide plans. This year's report focuses on developing and implementing plans between July 1st of 2022 and June 30th of 2024. And the report itself really focuses on the Yadkin, Cape Fear, and Broad River basins. So each of the following slides are set up in this similar format. This format also matches the format that we have in the report. We cover the plan development, where we are with plan development, public involvement and engagement, and then our statements on water quality and quantity while we were developing those plans. For the Yadkin PD River Basin, we presented, and that plan was presented and approved by the Water Quality Committee, or the EMC, in July of 2022. Special attention was paid to High Rock Lake, where nutrients and algal blooms have been identified as parameters of interest, and the Rocky River watershed, which is a very urbanized watershed that includes the Charlotte-Mecklenburg area and is heavily impacted by nutrients in that area. Basin planners work with stakeholders by phone calls, email, and met virtually and in person to get feedback into that plan. And since the plan has been developed, we have also been engaging in stakeholder meetings throughout the basin. Persistent water quality problems were noted throughout the basin. They're listed there on the slide. Current projected water use is expected to be met through 2060, as it was reported in the basin plan. Since plan development, the computer model for dissolved oxygen in the Rocky River is being updated, and there's heavy stakeholder engagement in the High Rock Lake watershed, which is ongoing. Basin planners continue to work on the fourth update to the Cape Fear River Basin Plan. The plan will focus on the chemical, physical, and biological impairments in the basin and identify areas where more information is needed to assess impacts from point and non-point sources of pollution. We're working with several divisions within the department to report on emerging contaminants within the basin. Basin planners, in partnership with the Cape Fear River Assembly, developed and distributed a stakeholder engagement survey during the development phase of this plan. The survey included questions about what concerns each of those stakeholders may have about water resources in the basin, what challenges and what their challenges are and possible solutions. Now, all questions or concerns will be addressed in the basin plan, but the survey did help basin planning and the Cape Fear River Assembly identify additional concerns in the basin. A summary of the survey results will be included in the plan, and basin planners have participated. In addition to that, basin planners have participated in several stakeholder meetings and coalition meetings throughout the basin. In the Cape Fear, persistent water quality problems with nutrients are discussed throughout each of the watershed chapters, and the plan will include water use and demand as reported by programs managed by DEQ, as well as the water use survey that is published by the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. Basin planners are also actively working on the 4th update to the Broad River Basin Plan. Much of the plan will focus on chemical, physical, and biological impairments in the area and areas where more information is needed to address point and non-point sources of pollution. Basin planners have been available by phone, as well as attended virtual and in-person meetings to discuss issues in the basin. Basin planners have also participated in field tours and met with stakeholders to see some of the issues firsthand. Biological integrity for benthic and macroinvertebrates and fish communities make up the majority of the impairments within the basin. Turbidity, fecal coliform bacteria, nutrients, and temperature are also a concern. The plan will include water use and demand as reported to DEQ programs, as well as the Agricultural Water Use Survey. Chemical, physical, and biological parameters are assessed regularly by DWR to determine how well water bodies are meeting their best intended use. Every 2 years, these assessments are submitted to EPA to fulfill the reporting requirements for Section 303D and 305B of the Clean Water Act. With the help of with the modeling and assessment branch, we were able to include a table that identifies how many assessment units or stream segments were identified as exceeding criteria or impaired. Nearly half of those are impaired in shellfish growing areas for bacteria, as designated by Division of Marine Fisheries. And 80 assessment units are on the 303D list for 1 or more metals, and all waters in the state are currently impaired for mercury due to advisories issued by the Department of Health and Human Services. OASIS hydrologic models have been completed for 11 of the 17 river basins. The Tar-Pamlico, Roanoke, Broad, and French Broad river basins are independent models. There are combined models for the Cape Fear Neuse, the New Watauga, and Yadkin and Lumber. For the Catawba, the hydrologic model is available through CHEOPS. This model is currently being updated by the Catawba Water Remanagement Group and will be available for DEQ to use. Also, between 2022 and 2024, DWR migrated all of the existing models to a new independent server. All the existing models are available to anyone who requests access. We also reevaluated data management workflows to create a more efficient process for gathering information for future updates to the hydrologic models. DEQ continues to make progress on developing and implementing basin-wide water resource management plans. We noted in the report that basin planners have also made progress on recommendations made in previous plans, which were approved by the EMC. This includes working with DWR's wastewater programs and providing comments on permit renewals, as well as continuing to support stakeholders who are relying on the plans to communicate water resource issues in the region. Over the course of the next year, basin planners will be focused on releasing the Broad and the Cape Fear River Basin plans for public comment and review. And we've already begun laying out the groundwork and the foundation for Cycle 5. For Cycle 5, we'll begin working in the Little Tennessee, Hiwassee, and Savannah River basins. The biennial report that you had as an attachment included targeted timeframes for upcoming plans, as well as the current basin liaisons. A special thanks to everyone who contributed to this report, but especially to Commissioner Deerhaig, who helped provide some edits and commentary to the report. The Division of Water Resources requests approval of the 2022-2024 biennial report on the progress of developing and implementing basin-wide water resources management plans to the Environmental Review Commission. And with that, I'll try to entertain any questions.
Okay. Questions of staff or Committee Chair Weiss? Commissioner Weiss, anything you want to add to?
Yes, Ms. Verhey came before the Water Allocation Committee yesterday's meeting with the presentation, and that committee moved unanimously to bring this before the EMC today and urge approval, and I'm prepared to make a motion at the appropriate time.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Yes, Commissioner Ellison.
What model are you using?
For the hydrologic models, it's OASIS.
Okay. And you have 80 assessment units that are 303D listed for metals?
Correct.
And what is the general source? What do you know about the source of those metals?
I believe that when we have included that in the basin plans, a lot of them have pointed to point sources, copper, zinc, iron, those type of parameters for metals.
And you have identified point sources for those?
We tend to look at the DMRs to see what is being reported through those permitted facilities. We can sometimes pinpoint point sources, sometimes we cannot. It really depends on where it is and how far upstream it is to the ambient monitoring station.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Baumgartner.
Hey, Michelle, good presentation. This is more of a comment than anything. I was, in reviewing the documents, it was interested to see that the statute actually directs quantity as well as quality. And in reading the report, I'm glad quantity showed up. Looking at, for instance, page 6, section C, and it's repeated in several of those basins. There's a water quality and quantity conditions title, but everything under it is quality, not quantity. Or maybe there's some quantity parts that were missing that I did not see. I would just encourage the department to, millions of dollars have been poured into this department from the legislature to deal with flood mitigation and quantity issues. I think the basin-wide plans should start beginning to reflect that as well. So it's just a comment. Also, I saw the EMC liaisons, and I know Commissioner Deerhake has talked about them before. What's the role for them in plan development going forward? Is it just, what capacity would we serve?
Thank you for the comment and also for the question. Basin liaisons in the past, it's really at your discretion how engaged and how involved you want to be. We are reaching out to the liaisons at the beginning of plan development as best that we can to say we're starting to begin development of these basins. Just to make you aware of what we're doing, we will often contact you for reaching out to stakeholders. If we have an opportunity to go out and tour the watershed with the stakeholders, you're certainly welcome. If you would like to be involved with those, we can engage that way as well. It's really during the public comment period that I think that you play a significant role in that you're reviewing the document with the public, trying to understand the concerns that they may have from their view. And then as we move forward, we'll review it with you during the public comment period. We'll review our presentation that we're going to give to the Water Allocation Committee or the EMC to see if you have any concerns. And we'll also review any public comments that we receive as part of that process. So it's to act more as an advocate for the basin as well as to support it as we move it through for approval to the EMC.
And all of those things, when we launched this, really Commissioner Deerhake and I back years ago, we want to make sure all the water bodies have an advocate on the commission, right? It's easy for us all to look at the news or the Catawba or somewhere where most of us live, but there are 17, and we need to make sure there is a go-to person on the commission for each of those in case there is an issue or a public concern, that we're a little more tuned in collectively on all that. So thank you for that program.
Yeah, thank you for volunteering to be a part of that program. And just to kind of add to that a little bit, each basin is on a different cycle. So while we appreciate the feedback and the reaching out to us when you want to know more about the basin, we'll give you the best information that we can at the time. But a lot of times we're moving forward on the plan we're currently in development on.
Yeah. And it can go, well, your role as an advocate there in that basin goes beyond just the planning. So if there's algal blooms or quality issues or whatever there is, feel free to talk to Michelle or to Director Rogers and to be familiar with what's going on in that basin on behalf of the commission. So thank you. Yeah,
Question.
Commissioner King.
Michelle, great presentation. Thank you. On the Water Quality Committee is what we're going through with point, non-point sources and reduction and so forth on PFAS. And we're in the Cape Fear area. So if we look at it, just an example, I'm just going to ask a question for my concern that I have, is that the stakeholders and the public hearings to come with getting this out for public. And then as committee members, we're receiving comments on the Cape Fear Basin or Cape Fear River, all the way up northern down to the to where it empties out into the ocean. So with those comments that are coming before it goes out to public hearing, is there a way that your department can harness those comments, just not from the municipalities or the producers or the county governances, but also through government agencies or stakeholders or maybe non-government organizations with their comments? Do you put those in lanes in these, as we're going through developing the strategies to take care of these issues?
I want to clarify, we do not go out for public hearings for the basin plans. They go out for a public comment period in which we notify people through our various listservs. We try to do a press release, and we really work with the river keepers. And in the Cape Fear, there's the Cape Fear River Assembly, there's the coalitions. So we work with all the stakeholders that we know are actively engaged in that basin and have helped plan development throughout. So when the plan is available for public comment, public review, we really blast them and say, hey, get this out to your constituents, get this out to your watershed groups, get these out to the public so that they can see what is some of the concerns or what the data is showing in the basin as well. When it comes to receiving those comments, we do try to put them into lanes. Like this is what we receive from the coalitions. This is what we receive from some of the municipalities, and this is what we receive from the public. So for the Cape Fear, as an example, we are likely not going to be able to address all the comments that we receive. Some of them will be appropriate to incorporate into the basin plan. Some of them might not be. But we will try to distinguish which we receive from who and what they are geared towards.
So with the Water Quality Committee, where we are at this time taking care of the New Hanover, Brunswick, Pender, Duplin, and the wells, all of that's going on from and it's actually can filter over, to the Neuse River as well. But the Cape Fear region is on the radar in a big way. So can the committee work with your group, or how does that work, where you can bring to the committee a report status of the stakeholders that are coming to you in reference to that basin?
So as part of our presentation that we bring to the committee, we will let you know how many public comments are received and kind of the nature of those comments. We typically haven't put together a document that includes all the public comments. That is something we've played with, but we've tried to avoid doing that because of the amount of work that would take. But we certainly, as part of the draft review or draft presentation to you, we have a couple of slides about how many comments we received, who they came from. We kind of put together a chart that we got them from this many from the public, we got this many from the coalitions. And the liaisons, of course, we can work with the liaisons for that basin, and they can help us review the comments as well to make sure that we're addressing all of them. I believe Commissioner Bailey and Commissioner Weiss are the liaisons for the Cape Fear.
Okay.
And
Thank you very much.
I'll give a little bit of history too. And I think that the planning process evolves. It started many years, decades ago. And the models were part of that development. But, we use these for a number of things. The IBT questions often come up. People say, what's the long-term planning focus of that? Oftentimes the basin plans aren't to that granularity, but they are consulted in that. There's other things that we use the basin plans for as far as the projections. But then it is supposed to be a forward-looking document. And I I listened to your comment, Commissioner Baumgartner, and was reminded of Commissioner Tedder a few years ago, former Commissioner Tedder, who said he didn't want these plans just to be something that all of them looked the same and didn't have any recommendations. That as these plans come through, they have to have some very specific recommendations for doing things. Now, the department don't want to get in trouble by getting too far out there, but we as an EMC have to approve these and be part so we can add some really sharper recommendations as we look to the future in some of these basins. And so I think that's a helpful place for the plans. And I do think every once in a while we have to go back, as you mentioned, Commissioner Baumgartner, and review what's the purpose and intent of these and make sure they're staying sharp to being a forward-looking document. So I think we're moving well. We've got a good plan. And we continue to produce these out on a pretty steady level, like sort of like you did the Title V permits in the previous. It's 2 or 3 every cycle, I believe, isn't it?
We're aiming that way for cycle 5 in particular. Yes.
Okay, very good. Any other questions of staff? Okay, hearing none. Commissioner Weiss, do you have a motion you'd like to make here?
Thank you, Chairman Solomon. Yes, I move that the Environmental Management Commission approve the 2022 to 2024 biennial report on the progress on developing and implementing basin-wide plans to the Environmental Review Commission.
Okay, we have a second on that? Second. Commissioner Tweedy? Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next item, item number 6 is the request for approval of a 30-day waiver and request to proceed to public notice hearing of the proposed rule amendments to 15 AC NCAC 2L 0202 groundwater quality standards and associated physical and regulatory impacts. This is the PFAS issue we discussed yesterday and approved in committee. So I've asked Bridget on the fly to kind of repeat her presentation, and then I'll turn it over to Committee Chair Reardon. Well, we'll ask questions, and we'll, Commissioner Reardon, I'll go to you for a motion, please.
Okay, great,
Oh.
thank you.
Yeah, okay, go ahead. There'll be 2 motions here. I'm
Yes,
sorry.
yes.
There'll be 2 motions, so go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Bridget Shelton, the Groundwater Standards Coordinator with the Division of Water Resources. As Chairman Solomon mentioned, we have 2 requests today. First, we're requesting approval of waiver for the 30-day requirement, Commission's 30-day requirement. And then following that, if approved, we are requesting to proceed to public notice and hearings with proposed rule amendments to 15A NCAC 02L 0202 groundwater quality standards and the associated fiscal and regulatory impact analysis. So first, DEQ requests that the Environmental Management Commission approve a waiver of the 30-day requirement on this item in order to expedite the rulemaking process.
So let's do that rulemaking first before we get into the meat. And we could not approve this and go no further, or we could approve this and then move to the presentation and then vote on the material presented in the presentation. So this time, do I have a motion for a 30-day waiver? Commissioner
Mr.
Carter.
Chairman, I would move that we approve a 30-day waiver to bring this matter to the commission for a vote today.
Okay, I have
second.
Commissioner Keene makes the second. Discussion on the motion among the commission. Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. So at this point, we'll proceed on hearing the details of the rules proposal.
Okay, yeah. So an outline for today, this is the same presentation we presented yesterday at the Groundwater and Waste Management Committee. So I'll cover background on the groundwater quality standards, including how they're developed. We'll then move on to the topic of the proposed rulemaking, which is PFAS, or per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. This will include going over the proposed groundwater standards for a subset of these PFAS compounds. And then Jessica Monti from the Division of Waste Management will then give a summary of the regulatory impact analysis, and then we'll present the proposed rulemaking schedule, followed by an action item request. So the groundwater quality standards rule is 15A NCAC subchapter 02L. Section 0202 in particular at the bottom here is where we are proposing amendments for this rulemaking. This section is where you can find the groundwater standards as well as the procedures laid out to develop those standards. Here is some more information on North Carolina's groundwater quality standards. So when we say standard, we mean a level or a maximum allowable concentration, which may be tolerated without creating a threat to human health. So these groundwater standards protect the groundwaters of the state as a resource for human consumption. It is an important resource in our state, as groundwater supports about 50% of drinking water use in North Carolina. Highlighting here that while the groundwater standards are a state program, they are not a federal requirement. They are, however, used in federal programs such as RCRA and Superfund in our state. So these programs in the state do rely on these groundwater standards. So there are two places in the O2L 0202 rule where the practical quantitation limit, or the PQL, is mentioned. So the PQL is a laboratory, it's an analytical term. The definition is highlighted at the bottom here. It can also be known as a reporting limit. So the rule states that substances that do not have a groundwater standard shall not be permitted in concentrations at or above the PQL. Currently, for PFAS substances, there is no standard. So the PQL is considered the existing standard or the baseline. Also, the rule states that when a standard for a substance is less than the PQL, the detection of that substance at or above the PQL constitutes a violation. So this is when there is an established health-based O2L groundwater standard value, but it is lower than that PQL value. The PQL value is then used as the compliance level for that substance, as it is not possible to measure to those calculated lower levels if they are below detection limits. So this is relevant for a couple of proposed PFAS standards, as we'll see later. I just want to note here that PQL values can change over time, and regularly laboratory analysis capabilities are constantly developing, and the PQL values can also vary across different laboratories. So the rule lays out the process of how our groundwater quality standards are developed. So first, we find the lowest of these values or these criteria listed here. This includes the non-cancer threshold concentration, the concentration which protects against cancer, as well as the federal maximum contaminant level. Just highlighting those because those are relevant for this presentation. So to develop a groundwater standard for a substance, we find each of these values if they are available, and then we select the lowest of the value to be the most protective of human health. These top two criteria here, the non-cancer threshold concentration and the concentration that protects against cancer, they require calculations using toxicity values, which are found in the literature. So the rule also defines which references we look at to find those toxicity values in order of preference listed here. So it's EPA's IRIS, Integrated Risk Information System program, EPA's Drinking Water Health Advisories, and then other EPA health risk assessment data. And then if there is no EPA data or values, we then look at other relevant published peer-reviewed toxicological data. So as you can see, we do heavily rely on EPA references as these assessments do go through intensive scientific review. So moving on to the topic of today, so PFAS, or per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. These are a group of manufactured chemicals that are used to make fluoropolymer coatings and products. These compounds are chemicals of specific concern due in part to their significant presence in North Carolina and their ability to move throughout and persist in the environment. They also have the ability to bioaccumulate and build up in people, animals, and the environment over time. So for this rulemaking, DEQ has evaluated the available scientific data to develop groundwater standards for a subset of PFAS compounds. So a little bit of background here. So information items on this topic were given to both the EMC and the Groundwater and Waste Management Committee over the last couple of years to prepare for this rulemaking. In May of this year, we presented an information item to the committee on the proposed groundwater standards and an overview of the regulatory impact analysis, or the RIA. Following this, at the July committee meeting, an action item was presented on these proposed PFAS groundwater standards and the associated RIA. And then we followed this with an action item at the committee meeting yesterday. So here are the compounds initially proposed at the July Groundwater and Waste Management Committee meeting by DEQ for groundwater standards development. There were 8 PFAS with their acronyms listed here. Just to note, the asterisk indicates which compounds are currently regulated by EPA's National Primary Drinking Water Regulation. So we proposed these 8 PFAS for rulemaking because these compounds have been detected in North Carolina, and the scientific data available shows that they can cause health effects. There's also toxicity data available for these compounds to derive the groundwater standards in accordance with our rule, and that data has been evaluated by a federal agency, with those assessments having been finalized and published within the last few years. So at the Groundwater and Waste Management Committee at their July meeting, DEQ presented the proposed rule amendment and the certified RIA for those 8 PFAS shown on the previous slide and listed here. The committee voted to have DEQ revise the rulemaking package to address 3 of those PFAS. So that was PFOA, PFOS, and HFPO dimer acid, otherwise known as Gen X. and then return to the committee with the agenda item as revised. DEQ did revise the proposed rule and the RIA accordingly and resent to OSBM for approval. The approval was received on August 14th, 2024, and this was presented as an action item at yesterday's committee meeting. So here is the summarized information for the proposed groundwater standards for those 3 PFAS. More detailed information can be found in the toxicological summary document in the appendix of the fiscal note. So here we've included the references used for the development of the standards, the toxicity benchmarks and values available for each of those compounds, and then the proposed groundwater standard in units of nanograms per liter or parts per trillion to the right here. So as you can see, there are multiple toxicity benchmarks and values available for these 3 compounds. The bolded values here are the ones that we use for the basis of the proposed standard, as these led to the lowest value in order to be the most protective of human health in accordance with the rule. And here is some more context on those proposed standards. So the left-hand column again lists the proposed groundwater standards in nanograms per liter. The middle column here shows the existing limit under the current O2L rule. So when, as we talked about, when there is no health-based groundwater standard for a substance, which is currently the case for any PFAS, the O2L rule states that that substance is not allowed in the groundwater at or above the PQL. So as a reminder, PQL values can vary across labs and change over time. The PQL values we have listed here are shown as a reference. These were reported by EPA in their recently finalized 1633 method. The right-hand column here shows the compliance level under the proposed rule. So for PFOA and PFOS, you can see that those calculated health-based values are lower than the PQL, or what can be reliably detected. The O2L rule does have language to account for this, shown on the right here. So when a standard for a substance is less than the PQL, the detection of that substance at or above the PQL constitutes a violation. So for PFOS and PFOA, this PQL language does apply. So the compliance level for those 2 compounds would be the PQL, although those proposed health-based standard values shown on the left here would be what was written in the rule. For Gen X, the compliance level, as shown in the right-hand column, would be the O2L health-based standard. So now I'll pass this off to Jessica Monti.
Good morning, Jessica Monti, Environmental Program Consultant with the Division of Waste Management. So this slide is showing for those who may have reviewed the RIA for the original 8 PFAS, this slide is showing what changed from that original version. So we revised it to remove the 5 that are no longer being considered as requested by the committee. We also revised it for clarification in response to questions and comments that we received from the committee during or after the July meeting. Summary of those questions and our responses were included as attachment C on the agenda at the committee meeting yesterday. We also updated the table that showed a comparison of landfill results to the proposed standards and the existing regulatory limit at PQL because we have additional data that had been received since the prior version had been developed. And then we also revised a couple of tables that were showing the benefits to remove the 3rd treatment option, which is a combination of granular activated carbon and ion exchange, because that option would not apply in the benefit scenario because the combination treatment would be for situations where there are high concentrations of PFOA and PFOS, but if you have high concentrations, then you would be required to do the remediation. You wouldn't fall under that scenario that's required for the potential for having a benefit. This slide is showing some of the kind of re-review of the impacts. So the previously proposed standards, 6 of them were higher than the existing limit at the PQL, but 5 of those 6 were removed. We still have Gen X there where the standard is higher than the existing PQL, but we're still collecting data. So the potential for the future cost savings that are mentioned resulting from that higher standard, we can't rule it out. It's, removing those 5 other constituents may have lowered the chances of someone being able to receive a benefit, but there's still that possibility for Gen X. So we left that information in the RIA because if even just one site fell under the scenario with Gen X, that could be resulting in a substantial economic impact. So still worth leaving that in the impact analysis. And so that there is no change to the overall conclusion of the IRA from that earlier version with the APFAS. Still the potential for future state government staff time savings, no added cost to the regulated community because of the existing standard being the PQL or the regulatory limit being the PQL. Potential future cost savings at a particular site that might fall under the scenario that we lay out in the RIA. And with one site having, even just one site falling under that scenario, having the potential to be substantial economic impact. And the largest benefit, of course, in our view as being the benefit of having regulatory certainty and clarification for the regulated community and state government staff. So as Bridget mentioned, the revised RIA was approved by OSBM as required. And I will turn it back over to Bridget.
Okay, so here's the proposed timeline of this rulemaking. So stakeholder meetings were held earlier this year. As mentioned, info item presentations have previously been presented on this topic to the committee and the full EMC. In July, an action item was presented and the committee directed DEQ to revise the rulemaking package to include 3 of the 8 proposed PFAS standards. We asked for approval to proceed to the EMC yesterday with those 3 proposed standards. We are now requesting approval to go to public comment and hearings. And then if approved, the comment period would follow, and we would then come back to the EMC with the hearing officer's report in 2025 to ask for approval of the final RIA and adoption of the rule, which would put us on track for a proposed effective date in mid-2025.
Okay.
So the action item request, DEQ requests that the Environmental Management Commission approve to proceed to public notice and hearings with the proposed amendments to 15A and CAC 02L 0202 and the associated fiscal and regulatory impact analysis.
Okay, I'm going to Commissioner Chair Reardon for additional comments at this point in conjunction with staff before we go to questions with staff and you. So any additional comments from you as committee chair?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Solomon. I would want to stay right up front. I really do appreciate the department's timeliness in this. They were very responsive to the meeting that we had in July, getting the RIA rewritten to support the direction of the committee and the motions made there. And so the department has been very timely in this, and so has the committee members in providing questions to DEQ to provide feedback, and all of that worked in a very timely way. I do want to make a couple of points. Chairman, you did a good outline of the timeline of getting us where we are, and I won't repeat that. But just for clarity here, with us bringing forward the 3 compounds, the PFOS and the PFOA, we all know they're legacy compounds. There's no dispute about where EPA is in the context of those being potential carcinogens. We know the struggles that the citizens of North Carolina have had with Gen X. And so we're comfortable with these 3 chemicals taking the levels in which have been identified in the body of the request here. On the other 5 remaining compounds, had the committee chose to include those, it would have allowed more of the chemical in the water. But by the department regulating at the PQL level for those other 5, lessens the amount of these compounds in the water. And I know there's a lot of concern about that, and I just wanted to clear that up. So in this case, again, the work of the committee here, going forward with these 3 compounds, for the 2 legacy compounds and the Gen X compounds, are supportive of the department's recommendations for these levels of these compounds. And again, the work of the committee by not including those 5 maintains that the regulatory position of DEQ is to regulate those compounds at a lesser level than otherwise was requested for approval. And I think that's very important. I'll stop with those comments before we make a motion.
Okay, so before I come back to motion here, questions of staff or of the committee on any items here? Any questions? Commissioner Baumgartner.
Just one comment, and Bridget can confirm. DWM has the authority right now to regulate and does regulate PFAS compound in groundwater at PQL. So this rule really changes standards. It doesn't change your ability to regulate. You're already doing that now.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So hearing no other questions, Commissioner Reardon, you had a unanimous vote in committee yesterday. Do you want to make a motion?
I do want to make a motion that the commission approve to proceed to public notice and hearing with the proposed amendment to 15A NCAC 02L.0202 and the associated physical and regulatory impact analysis for public comment.
Okay, do we have a second?
I second it.
Vice Chair Baumgartner seconds that motion. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous. Okay, thank you, Bridget. Thank you, Jessica. Let me go ahead and say this out of the gate so that we'll get a call on hearing officers, but I want this kind of starting to get scheduled. Commissioner Ellison, I will name you the lead hearing officer on this. We'll do 3 of these, so we get this maximum. We've done 3 of these. We do 3 of these. When we need the maximum impact, we'll go east, west, and central. I'll ask Vice Chair Duggan if you will be the hearing officer in the west, mainly because you've got scheduled, you've just given to Commissioner Carter to do for you. So no good deed goes undone. And then I'll ask Commissioner Gibson if you will be handle the one in the east. But certainly this committee, you're all professionals. Please, the 3 of you or not committee, but you 3 as the hearing officers, please work together to make sure the schedule. Michael, let everybody work together, but you have the point here to break any other ties or any directions you need within the group of hearing officers. But we'll get those scheduled as quickly as your schedules and the state will allow, DEQ schedules will allow. Okay? Okay, so hearing no other comments on that, we will move to item number 7. Yeah, there is no presentation with item number 7. There's probably not any discussion of item number 7 other than I think every one of you guys received a copy of a de-delegation of the MPDS program that was petitioned by a group of third-party stakeholders to the Environmental Protection Agency. The MPDS program is statutorily under the EMC, and as we've talked about several times, those permits are issued in the name of the authorization of the EMC. However, we have delegated that by our own rule to the department to the MPDS program. And so the way that agreement works from 2007, you have it in your package, but that agreement is between the EPA and the department, so to speak. But because of the statutory delegation that we have done and the statutory responsibility that we've done, I should say, I think it's prudent, not that I need something else to do or Commissioner Duggan needs something else to do, but that we be at the table if and when, and we don't know if or when the EPA will move on this, that the EMC is represented by the chair and vice chair in those communications, whether they be by email or meeting or whatnot. I won't speak for the department, but I did talk to the department about this, and they indicated no problem with this, and we should be joined to EMC and DEQ at the hip on this kind of thing. So I'm asking for you guys to, someone to make a motion to move that well, you can read what it says there, but basically the EMC through the chair and vice chair are given authority to be at the table.
Mr. Chairman, I would make that motion, but let me make one slight suggestion, which is you might want to add either the chair and vice chair or designee because of the schedules for both of you. If the meeting got scheduled and both of you were not available, that at least another member of the commission could serve in that capacity.
Okay. I don't have a problem with it. I think at first I wasn't, just put it this way. I wasn't going to even put the chair and vice chair on it. I was just going to say EMC and thought the chair would stand. Some of these recent conversations, somebody said, put the chair. And then I said, well, I'm not going to be the only one here. I'm going to bring my trusty vice chair with me anyway, formally or informally. So now that gets formal. And if you want to add or other designee,
yeah,
I don't think I have a problem with that.
Maintain it with 2, but as long as we have that, you have that option if you know, if the scheduling conflict or something.
You could just say the EMC be included in all this.
Well, let's go with the other designee because I like to know that there's the chair and the vice chair specific,
Yeah.
and I think
No, I think it should stay that way.
I think
Exactly.
the EMC needs to know that as it goes forward.
And I so move.
Okay, do we have a second on that? And the motion is or designee, right? Okay, do we have a second on that motion? Commissioner Yarborough seconds that motion. Discussion on that motion. Yes, Commissioner Lyerly.
So, thank you, Commissioner, Chair Solomon. Again, I asked this question really out of ignorance because this is not really, my area. But it seems to me, in reading this petition, it seems like a lawsuit. And it seems like if there's a lawsuit involving the DEQ and their relationship with the state and the regulatory authorities over it, having an action, a formal action, inserting in response to the lawsuit, I don't know if that's a good thing, a bad thing, an appropriate thing for that. So I was curious if there was a opinion or thought from our legal counsel regarding the action.
And I'll just go back before she answers. It's a petition, not a lawsuit. And these have been done to the EPA in the past and other places and at other times. So this is in some ways a little new recently, but this is not a new thing in the history of the EPA. So it is a petition, not a lawsuit. And the counselor can tell us the differences in the two and whatnot. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, as Chair Solomon said, it's not a lawsuit. So we are just ensuring that there's some representation of the EMC in any discussions. I mean, I think you could think of it as, I suppose if there's any settlement discussions, the EMC would want to be a part of it. But I don't know that it's as formal as, becoming either an amicus in a lawsuit or becoming a third-party intervener in a lawsuit. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but the formality of this petition process is not the same as if there was actually a lawsuit in court.
And let me add this additional perspective, because obviously that's absolutely right. As I read this petition, there's been no, this petition seems like to be a beef to the EPA of what the General Assembly and the group has done. I don't see anything to see where the department or the EMC has specifically violated the Clean Water Act. So if those things are discussed and kind of finding a fact or whatnot, we would need to be there too.
Sure.
And this gets a little bit far afield, but we do have the power for declaratory ruling. So if somebody's been aggrieved either by the department going too far or too little in their rules, or maybe not doing what they should, those private citizens come and go through a quasi judicial process on a declaratory ruling for us to see if what's being done matches the rules. So I'm just saying, if there's some finding of fact or some conversations that go on, we should be part of it. So, but anyway, you have your opinion and.
Yeah, no,
and we
again,
can
just
answer it.
for me, the clarification of the fact that it's a petition, not a lawsuit, that's very helpful. Again, the optics of really, finding a way rather than this more formal approach to ensure that communication occurs. If in your opinion, that's the most appropriate approach, and that's the motion that's proposed, I think that's fine. I guess just for my own clarification, what's the advantage of the formal request rather than just saying, gosh, if you're going to be in discussions with the EPA and we have a regulatory authority, we would have expected to be part of that communication. I guess I just don't know if that's, if you weren't making this formal request, would that be usual and customary? They would have a discussion without including any dialogue or correspondence with the EMC?
I would hope it's more of an issue of timeliness and something that we can hear and again, look at our statutory powers that we have and make sure that we're being aligned. EPA doesn't understand that for all 50 states necessarily, I guess, but that we are at the table for those discussions.
Just to clarify that what the
Yeah.
relationship might be, that this clarifies it, that you should be involved in the conversation. That
Yeah,
makes sense.
and really, I hope they're not saying, JD, what do you think? Or Chris, what do you think? Because I mean, again, I want to be part of it, but this ain't something else I need to do in my life, but I think it's our duty to do it as a body to be there. So, yes, Commissioner Bailey.
Thank you. This is probably a question for council.
Yeah.
When a petition is filed like this, aren't there some timelines for EPA to respond or what? Is there any procedure?
No, there's not. These petitions, the EPA would initially need to decide whether it's actually going to take up the petition to dedelegate. As far as I know, that decision has not been reached yet. So there is not a procedure or a timeline for these to take place. And some of these can take years.
They just sit there.
Yes, ma'am.
And then if they are accepted by the US EPA, then do any timelines come in or still no?
I don't believe there's any timelines associated with this. If the EPA decides to take up the petition, then there would be an investigation. That's when I would anticipate there to be discussions between DEQ, EMC, and the EPA.
Oh,
But
during,
no,
okay.
no timeline.
But even so, there's no timeline. It's just an investigation.
Correct.
Okay, interesting.
Okay. Any other questions or comments, council or otherwise? Okay, we have a motion and a second. With no further discussion, I'll call for the motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, that includes the action items for today. We had no information items, but I am going to change the order of the closing comments here, concluding remarks, to put attorney comments, council comments first. And the reason I do this is we got a email, and I got it at the same time you guys got it. I didn't have any advance seeing of it. Night before last from DQ Legal Counsel Lane on the topic of the public information request. We are not going to solve that here today, but council, I've asked council a couple months ago to be involved in that actively on behalf of the EMC in response to some of the comments Commissioner Carter had a few months ago. I also brought in Vice Chair Duggan, again, no good deed goes unpunished, to really look at this week to week with me. I didn't want to do this by myself because this is a big thing on the public records request. It's an obligation we have under state law. So I brought in Commissioner Duggan to watch this week to week as well. But Council Young has been looking at this, and she has been talking to Council Lane, and this seems to be, in her comments today, probably the top of the list for things for her to discuss with us. And she can recommend Bill come up if she needs to as well, but he may not. So, Council Young.
Thank you, Chair Solomon. I just wanted to update you all on the 4 current pending public records requests. I know you all received those in one email a couple nights ago. I know there have been a range of concerns on these public records requests from the commission, and I appreciate your patience as I've worked with DEQ's general counsel to kind of develop how we're going to respond to these. As you all know, DEQ provides administrative support to the EMC, which is why they are involved, and they will facilitate getting these requests out to the parties that are asking for the public records. That doesn't mean that I am not going to be involved. In fact, I am going to continue to be involved. And any questions or concerns that you all have about these requests, please still come to me. I'll be working closely with the Office of General Counsel at DEQ to make sure that we're all doing what we need to do to get these requests fulfilled. Along those lines, next week, I'll be reaching out and we will establish times where I can meet with all of you, along with someone from General Counsel's office to go through the process that we're going to take to respond to these requests. We're hoping to make it as simple as possible, and I know you all have commitments beyond this commission, so we are hoping to make it as quick as possible for you to respond to these requests as well. In the going forward, I know there are discussions at DEQ to get you all DEQ email addresses. I will give more updates as they come, but that's kind of where we are right now. So starting next week, we can actively start responding to these public records requests. And again, I hope that the burden on your all time will be fairly minimal after we go through a little bit of training on how to get all of your records over to the department so they can facilitate that response out to the requester.
Chairman Solomon.
Yes, I heard it. Commissioner Reardon, who said? I heard Chairman Solomon out of somewhere. Oh, Commissioner Reardon, I'm sorry, man. Could you tell where that came from? I'm sorry.
No, I just want to say on my behalf, I really think it's the responsibility of the department to provide the membership here email addresses. You know, when you're placing the burden of complying with these public records requests on in a variety of different personal emails that's been set up to accommodate that, that places a significant burden, not only on time, but technology and the ability to do that. I don't know anyone sitting around here on this membership not willing to be transparent and share. But to not provide email addresses for this membership to be able to, that the department itself can initiate these public records requests is quite astonishing to me. With the cost that the burden would be on the department to provide these email address is nebulous. It's pennies. But the burden being placed on this membership, not only in the use, the time, the technology that they might have, their awareness and the utilization of that technology, but the part that bothers me the most, that if one of the members somehow misses some email or something that they somehow define or characterize as not willing to provide or incapable of whatever, it deeply concerns me. I think that should be taken off the table, and then they can have access to every email that comes from anybody to that domain. And I know council has spoke about that, but I want the DEQ to hear me say that the failure to provide email addresses to the membership of this committee, I find it is irresponsible. The cost base to this agency to provide 15 email addresses is trivial. So to say to not do it for a cost reason or any of that other, I don't find that completely unacceptable, and that's my personal opinion.
Thank you for your comment.
I do just want to clarify, if I could, if an email happens to be missed, but you all have diligently tried to fulfill the request, and there's no intent to hide that record, you all are certainly covered. The Attorney General's office covers you in any lawsuit for that. So I want to make sure you are aware of that, that if you happen to accidentally miss an email, you are not going to be left floundering.
Yes.
You will have legal representation.
And I appreciate that from legal, but I just know from an integrity standpoint, we are all accomplished people that have a lot of integrity. And as Commissioner Reardon said, we don't want our, question, that we're going home and kicking our dog or anything insinuated about us. It's not true, because I think we're all trying to do that. So, but I appreciate you're with us on the legal side. Yes. Commissioner Tweedy.
Question. So, even if we had the DEQ emails, which I'm not disagreeing with anything Commissioner Reardon said, that doesn't preclude us from having to go back or to go through our personal emails and other accounts we have, correct? Because the request is that any emails we have had sent to us or we've sent doesn't specify to a certain domain. So I agree. I do agree. I believe that would make it easier, but you still got to go back and check that box that you've gone through other. You haven't gone around the email address. Is that correct?
That is correct. I think what that gives us is that is the place where most of them, all of them should be. And it gives the department, when they have that request, to respond within hours or days, not somebody blasting us by saying it's taking Joe 3 months to do his search with all his business stuff. It really puts it at the fingertips. We're still obligated to do it, and we will do it. But it really gives it more of a timeliness for the public. Yes.
Commissioner Tweedy, you're absolutely right. And I think one of the things that we're trying to do is, by going through and establishing a process based on the email addresses you have now, any request that, if you were to be given DEQ email addresses tomorrow, right? Any request that predates tomorrow, you'd still have to go back and look at your other accounts. And if you are conducting commission business on multiple accounts, then you would have to go look at all of those as well. So you're absolutely correct, but it would, would help.
I got Commissioner Yarborough first, and then Commissioner Gibson.
Yes, I'd just like to recognize the value that Ellie presented when we got that original one from the department from Bill Lane, that was specific of what we needed to do. When I first was asked about being appointed to this by the former chair, the only question she asked, do you have any questions? The only question I had, will I have representation? Because I anticipate lawsuits within this group, unfortunately. And she looked at it, and the former person from Philip called me and said, yes, you will have, just like you just said. To me, when I felt a lot better when you sent within an hour that you do represent us.
Thank you.
And so I'm grateful to you for reaching out and being able to do that, because we are represented by the Attorney General's office as a commission member. And I have been on many commissions before, and that's the way it is. It's very comforting to me to be able to have that representation. That's all I'll say. So thank you very much for reaching out as quick as you did.
One, okay, and then we'll go to Gibson. Go ahead, Commissioner Reardon, if you're adding on to that.
The last thing I'll say, I want to echo what Commissioner Yarborough said. Thank you for the email you sent out, the timeliness of that. You've met with me. We've gone through those and done that. I want to thank you publicly for your effort, your time, your commitment to this cause. It's not going unnoticed whatsoever. So thank you.
Commissioner Gibson.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to echo the request for an email address. That would be super helpful. But meanwhile, thanks for offering to help us simplify this request, responding to it as much as possible.
Yes, Commissioner Weiss.
This is sort of a process question, but I've had it since we started receiving these public records requests. And that is, who confirms to the requester that your request has been received and is being processed? Because I do feel like that was left hanging. I mean, so, and are they coming to the appropriate place by emailing all of us? And that may be a DEQ response, but yeah, Ms. Young, if you can elaborate on that, thank you.
Sure. So, so far, I know the requests that have come to the commission, Chair Solomon has responded acknowledging the request and acknowledging that we'll be working on it. DEQ, has its normal process for any public records request that comes directly to them. Going forward, one of the things that I'll be working with General Counsel's office is making sure that there is that standard process so that all requests are handled the exact same way.
I think that would be a very appropriate thing to do rather than, and also certainty for the public requesters to know that they are using the right portal to request. I realize there's no timeline for responses, no rigid timeline, but it is important, I think, to acknowledge the request and for the requester to know that it's been received in the right place.
There we go.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ellison first. He had his hand up first.
Commissioner Reardon mentioned that this only costs pennies. There's also no technological reason why this cannot be done rapidly. It's simply setting up a new account. It's not a major IT endeavor. So somebody just needs to make the decision and then execute that decision at the department level.
Mr. Carter.
I want to support Commissioner Weiss's comment. And for me, that's exactly why, or part of the reason why I've recommended for some time now, we need to put something in our bylaws on public records request procedures, and I will continue to push that.
Yeah, and I know, we talked about it a little bit yesterday.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Let me say this for Commissioner, let me say this for council real quick. I want a process too, because I feel like I have to respond as chair when they're sent directly to us and not copied to DEQ. So I respond, but then I want to be responsive to the public. To Commissioner Weiss's request, this has to go through the legal reviews and the checkoffs, and I have no control over that. I don't know where they go after, they start coming in and who gets them. So I've asked for that too. I don't mind being responsive to the public. I don't mind being transparent, but I need to understand, as the chair and this whole commission needs to understand, because I don't want to look like I'm delaying anything. I'm being as responsive as I can be. So we'll be working on that, and I don't know if anything, but the point for y'all is you got stuff from Council Lane with DEQ the other day, tonight. Council Young respond to it. I want y'all to know that over the last couple months, three of us have all been working on it up front here, and we will continue to work on it so that we can be responsive. And I want the public to know that we're trying to be as responsive as we can. So anyway, enough said there. Council Young, anything else you want to add on your agenda?
Sir.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Commissioner King, yeah.
One question, listening through that, I guess, I think we all know where all this has come from. But is there a relational platform that has been established or being established where legal counsel from the EMC, legal counsel from DEQ, that platform being designed where when questions come and answers are given to the same subject matter, are we both seeing, hearing, and understanding the same on both sides at the same time? Is that platform been established?
Not yet. And I think
Can it
if I
be?
understand, it can be. And in some cases with these state commissions, there's 400 state commissions. There's 68 to do rulemaking, I believe, 64. There's a lot of state commissions. Some of these have these relationships mandated in statute. Ours does not. So that may fall out of this at some point of does this need to be more formal than it's traditionally been? But there are a lot of boards and commissions in the state that do and do not do rulemaking or other actions. So.
Well, just to follow up, I would like to see an answer to that if there's a platform that can be established that where both DEQ and the EMC Commission can be advised, and at least advise that the same subject matter is being answered, questions and answers on both sides on the same subject matter. That's,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, we got to
Y'all work that out, but
All right.
it's just for clarity and transparency. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Okay, thank you for the update, council. Let me move to directors, and we'll start with Director Vinson.
Thank you, sir. Glad to be with you this morning still.
Yeah, I don't know if we got a mic on you over there.
My apologies. Glad to be with you again this morning still. Got a few just quick announcements for you. First off, Geological Survey doesn't really generally have a lot of business with the EMC. However, some of you or several of you know Dr. Kenneth Taylor, our longtime state geologist and prior director of North Carolina Emergency Management, will be retiring December 1 of this year. So if you know him, please be aware and reach out and give him, pass on your congratulations. Other than that, a few other items of business. The dam safety program. FEMA has announced that it's making $185 million available nationwide for high hazard potential dams for repair, modification, and or removal in the upcoming year. It appears that North Carolina qualifies for approximately $9.4 million of this grant availability. This does not mean that the dam owners that qualify will apply for that available money, and FEMA will determine that some dam owners are not eligible. Requirements and paperwork have been seen as onerous to some qualifying dam owners. Also, this grant is only available to state and local publicly owned high hazard dams, as well as certain nonprofits in the state. Under the stormwater program, a couple of items. We'll be finalizing our Access DEQ online permitting process solution for construction stormwater, which is planned to go live before the end of the year. It will complement our new system for erosion sedimentation control that went live November 1st of last year. It will begin as a separate standalone process and will be merged into a combined system with ENSC in early 2025. This will ultimately allow applicants to obtain their erosion sedimentation control approvals and their NCGO1 permit coverage in a single application process for any projects coming completely through DEMLR. Erosion sedimentation control approvals that originate with local programs will also have an online process in this solution to obtain their O1 coverage. One other stormwater program update is post-construction stormwater permitting. Most of you know has implemented the new permit review timeline requirements as of July 1st of this year. As a reminder, that legislation reduces our permit review period from 90 days to 70 days and further reduces additional information review process from 90 days to 30 days for both the state and the applicants. That concludes my announcements and information for you today. Any questions for us in DEMLR?
Yes, Mr. Yarbrough.
Just one question to follow up on something we talked about before.
Yes, sir.
With soil and water and
Mhm.
MOA with the Sedimentation Control Commission. Is there any update on that at all?
We're still working through that, but we're making progress.
Okay, well, thank you.
Probably two things I always get is questions on some of your DEMLR general permits, everything on that front moving well and.
General permits are moving through fine. I think we've moved through 5 or 6 already this year. I think that's all we have remaining for this year, but of course, we have 2 or 3 that run through next year as well. I believe our O2 mining is probably the most visible that'll be worked through over the next year.
Second thing is always the stormwater programs with local governments, and I know you've had lost somebody. We heard that yesterday as a commission, but I know you've lost somebody, a key person on that a couple months ago. How's that going? And do you think you'll have that position filled, or will things slow down in that front or speed up? Or
Fingers crossed this morning, we just got approval to offer to the 3rd candidate we've made an offer to. So hopefully we'll get some positive feedback later today on that.
Thank you. Any other questions for Director Vincent? Okay, that's good.
Thank you.
All right, Director Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the commission, a few updates for this morning. Did want to share with the commission that the Division of Waste Management and Division of Environmental Assistance and Customer Service are working on the final edits to the 2024-2034 Solid Waste and Materials Management Plan as required under General Statute 130A 309.06. The purpose of this state plan is to assess the status of solid waste and materials management in our state and provide new objectives and strategies to achieve environmental and economic benefits for the next decade. The first state plan was adopted in 1990 and updated in 2003 and 2014. So this update will constitute the 4th iteration of the state plan. So there's some key objectives in it, focusing on advancing waste reduction in our state, evaluating landfill capacity, which is an essential measure for North Carolina, growing the circular economy, optimizing material recovery, focusing on some special waste across our state, and engaging with the public. So a huge amount of work going in on that front, and we look forward to the next decade of materials management in North Carolina.
Director Scott, before I forget, that's one of the hot buttons I use when I talk to people about what's big in the state. So it is big.
It is.
Any pieces of information you can give us in advance to help the groundwater, I know you will, but that would be very informational for us, and any assistance or input we could provide you, we'll be glad to do that. I'm sure Commissioner Reardon, right?
Definitely. We're glad to share the updates on this front. We really are trying to get it in final stages, but it does provide an excellent framework for what's next, the next 10 years. There could be some rule aspects tied to that. We're talking a lot about construction and demolition waste recycling, taking that out of final disposal and what can be recycled when buildings are demolished. There also are some areas where we're looking at potential statutory changes that we may want the General Assembly to consider. So a huge amount of work, but when you think about the next decade and what we call materials management, we're shifting from putting waste in landfills to managing materials, creating jobs through managing those materials. It is a key plan. So we'll definitely keep this committee updated.
Thank you.
Yeah. On the PFAS front, appreciate the discussion yesterday and definitely today on this important subject. We are compiling sanitary landfill data from across the state. Sanitary landfill means municipal solid waste, where your white garbage bag goes. Construction demolition landfills and industrial landfills have all been sampling for PFAS in groundwater, surface water, and leachate, as requested by DEQ starting in 2023. So we are getting a pretty robust database together on that front. The discussion with the commission and the committee yesterday will help us to further evaluate that data and next steps. We also, not just on the PFAS front, we've been working on a comprehensive rule set for utility scale solar decommissioning. As you know, North Carolina is a leader in the United States on solar. Obviously, we need to plan per the General Assembly's direction under Session Law 2023-58, what we're going to do with these solar facilities when they do need to be decommissioned. So that rule set is also going into the final stages of development. It's actually a DEQ rule set, and we hope that rule set will be out for public comment either in September or early October as we try to meet the Session Law deadlines coming up in 2025. Just a short note here, as it is hurricane season, we were lucky to have minimal impacts on our facilities from Tropical Storm Debbie. We did have a few petroleum releases that obviously have been followed up on by those permittees. And when there's not permittees, we've been addressing them at the state level, but hoping still for a minimal impact to the state with our ongoing hurricane season. A couple of critical sites I just wanted to briefly touch on before I wrap up. We continue to work with EPA, Pact of Evergreen on the possible transition of that plant in Canton, North Carolina, the closed paper mill, and what may be next for it. There's active discussions with our Brownfields program, which I know Commissioner Keene touches on fairly often, and we appreciate that, and ongoing work to address some of the site impacts at that former closed paper mill. And the last one you may have seen in the news, we have a lot of different DEQ staff assisting with the unfortunate ongoing petroleum releases in Buxton, North Carolina. This is the Outer Banks at the former Navy and Coast Guard installation. This was actually a submarine listening station during the Cold War that's been decommissioned. We've had petroleum sheens in the Atlantic Ocean, a very erosive beach. The beach can remove and redeposit up to 30 inches of sand overnight, so it's a very dynamic environment. But we're pleased that the Army Corps came this week with equipment, further assessment work to address these ongoing releases. But a very active and dynamic site. We've been concerned about it, putting in a lot of time on it, and hoping we have a good path forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions for Director Scott? Commissioner Reardon?
I do. Director Scott, you mentioned solar panels, and what we've seen across North Carolina, in many cases, some of the best farmland we have end up with solar panels on it. What I'm hoping in the decommissioning process, though, is that we haven't permanently taken that farmland out of utilization for future growers and farmers. You know, half the fruits and vegetables we eat every day are imported into the United States. We only grow about half of what we eat of that. But a lot of this land may hopefully someday go back into agriculture production. So I hope we have the right monitoring in place. I hope we have the right testing in place, ensuring that if that is removed from that farmland can go back into agriculture production. What I hope we don't get down the road and say, now that we had them on here and we take them off, we can't use it for one reason or another. So I know you're forward leaning and forward thinking, but I hope I don't see that farmland cannot be repurposed once these things have been decommissioned. We know they're subject to hail damage and a lot of things in which there could be repairs taking place on these panels. I hope we don't look back and let this land be the next Gen X issue. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. This rule set is looking at what's required to return that site to its intended first use. If that is agriculture production, what's required to decommission that site. We've looked at some of the work from, I believe, Dr. Heiniger and others at NC State regarding soil nutrient levels or other impacts after solar facilities. So yes, appreciate the comments. The goal is the same. And I would say that the property owners with this rule set would still have the option, if it were a farmer and wanted to return to agricultural production in 30 or 40 years when the panels are no longer efficient, they still have the ability as the property owner to negotiate their land use requirements in addition to the state requirements that the General Assembly has asked to be put forward.
That's good.
Yep.
Very good. Commissioner Tweedy.
Quick question. If I heard you right, I think you mentioned some petroleum releases as a result of the storm that couldn't be tied back to permits. What would be an example of that?
It would be a site where we've had a buried UST tank, where the site's no longer a gas station, but the tank is still there. So we've had a lot of quick action from Tropical Storm Debbie where it was already a permitted site, but a few instances where there's not a responsible party that we're following up on. So that's what I meant there. So a tank that was still in the ground that we need to address either through one of our abandoned tank programs or another measure.
Okay, so that there are some tanks, this is my ignorance, there are some tanks out there that maybe were abandoned before some of the new rules, because I don't think that's allowed now, correct?
Right. And we do, with every storm, unfortunately, we deal with above ground tanks too, which formally don't get permits, as you may know. So there's a whole universe of petroleum from what's underground to what's above ground. Yeah, good question.
Any other, Commissioner Ellison? Yes.
Just quickly, so the Buxton site is a naval facility. The Corps of Engineers are they doing the construction? Is the Navy out of it, or who's the lead for the feds?
So we have both the Navy and the Coast Guard under notices of regulatory regulatory requirement for impacts to groundwater, meaning DEQ. So there's two potential responsible parties. We technically call both of them responsible parties because the Coast Guard operated there and the Navy. The Army Corps is performing the assessment and immediate abatement on behalf of the Navy.
Thank you. They're providing resources as well.
They are. So they're bringing technical teams, equipment, removing sand, petroleum impacted sand starting this week. A further contract is going into place next week, comprehensive environmental assessment in October. So there is a path forward. We're just wanting these timelines to be short. This has been an issue that started months ago, technically end of last year. So the timing here is very critical for immediate action.
Any other correct questions for Director Scott? Okay, hearing none. Director Rogers?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Just a few update items related to Division of Water Resources. First, as you know, we've been working on a trout permit revision to that. Just the latest update we have on that. The work group that includes the Department of Agriculture, Farm Bureau, and trout farmers and ourselves, we've come up with a draft permit that we circulated around to EPA. For their comments. This is not a final draft or anything, but just something for we have pulled together. We've gotten comments back from EPA. We met with them a little earlier this week. We'll be getting back to the work group and working with them on the comments. I will tell you, I think in general, EPA was pretty willing to accept where we were. We have to do a few clarifying matters on the permit, but it is all good. We continued the dialogue. We also participated, or I participated at a trout farmers meeting with the North Carolina Aquaculture Association earlier in the month, virtually. That was in Franklin, and they were given an update on where we were in this permitting process. Got feedback from the farmers on it that we'll take into account as we move forward as well. And also there is Representative Gillespie attended. So we're all working together on this and moving forward with it and in a good place. We'll continue the dialogue and continue that process. Legislatively, I believe at last session, we had discussions related to Senate Bill 802, Section 5.1, modernized wastewater permitting to support environmental sound and economic development. One of the charges in that provision was a letter that Chair Solomon and I got together, drafted, and was sent to EPA July 31st. The deadline on that was August 1st, so appreciate Chair Solomon working with us on that to get that out as well. So we got that out to EPA. To date, we have not had comments back from them. Our intention is to reach out to them real soon and see where they are as it relates to that. The subsection 5.1E is also another requirement for the department and the collaboratory to work together, develop a work group to consider general permits for NPDES. That work group kicked off its meeting in August 26th. We were required to meet by September 1st. We did that. We had a virtual meeting of the work group. The collaboratory was required to appoint 5 members to the commission. In my notes that you have online, the bios of those appointees are there for you, as well as, I think, the agenda for our first meeting. The other portion of this is reported out. We were required to report quarterly on the advancement of the work group, as well as our work with EPA on proposed rules. That report was submitted in a timely manner. And again, I thank the chair for his quick review of that. It was submitted to the legislature as required. So we continue to work on that and make it a priority. Our next work group committee meeting will be for the NPDES general permit will be October 3rd.
And while you change pages, thank your staff and you too, because we've been working right ahead of the deadline. Let's say that.
Absolutely. Well, yeah,
we done, right?
We almost made the deadline, so it's good. I'd spent some time, and I hope you will go through. Emergency response is a aspect of work that the division does that we don't pay a whole lot of attention to, but it is critical. And it happens a whole lot more than you think. It's not just when the big storms come along. It's also every weekend and every day when there's an accident on the road, where there's a spill. Our staff is responding. We have staff that carry phones 24/7, so they can respond to these incidents and advise folks on scene as we go. I listed a couple examples for you all just lately of what's happened. There was a spill in Virginia. I think I may have talked about that earlier, but a spill of nutrients and pesticides and herbicides into tributaries of the Roanoke River and the Mehuron River. And I just wanted to give y'all an overview of the activities that carried on. You can read that at your leisure, but it did take time. We did a great job of coordinating, working with Virginia EMS and others to ensure that our drinking water supplies were protected, our public water supply systems were on notice, and staff did a great job on that. Obviously, Tropical Storm Debbie came through a few weeks ago, and again, our folks stepped up. Our folks in the regions were out looking at lagoon levels, looking at wastewater treatment plants, inventorying them, going back again to make sure that we were still not endangering and supporting those systems throughout the storm and post-storm. So I encourage you to read that. It is something that we take for granted almost, but it is important. And I just want to thank the staff that participate in those areas across the regions and in the department for their service and the extra time they put in during those events. Finally, just a brief staffing update. We're running about a 15% vacancy rate, which is better than it was, but we hadn't really seen a decline in that over the past 6 or 8 months. We continue to work about that. Michael Bajetra did a little background check, and I think there is good news as it relates from our leadership in the division. We've replaced or filled about 20 supervisory positions over the last 2 years. It really does provide a whole lot of support to the frontline staff when they do have a supervisor in place. And so we're excited about having achieved that. We have some really dedicated and great supervisors in place. And I think in the long run, it'll help us fill those staff members that we have. So we're excited about that. We'll still remain and working hard to fill those vacancies. The challenges in filling vacancies have not changed. They're the same. We have difficulty filling engineers positions. And again, we're always limited by our salary and those types of things. So the challenges are there, but we continue to work to get those positions filled. And we're excited about having supervisory positions filled so that we can provide good leadership and guide the division forward. Those are my comments, Mr. Chair. I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Questions of Director Rogers? Good. We've seen a lot of you lately, so it's good. Director Abrzynskis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to everyone. A couple of quick updates from the Division of Air Quality this morning. Since we last met, there have been a few days when we've had some high ozone in the Piedmont Crescent of North Carolina, especially the Charlotte Triad and Triangle areas. Several days where we registered values above the level of the standard, or what we call exceedance days. And what's interesting about those particular days, they all coincided with the presence of wildfire smoke from the western U.S. or Canada. And so as we move forward, and I asked our team to start looking into the last 2 years of days when we had monitored values above the level of the standard, and almost every one of them coincided with wildfire smoke. As we look at the literature, we know from a lot of work that's out there that wildfire smoke, especially aged wildfire smoke air masses, can accelerate and complement the normal photochemistry processes and add a bump of about 10% more ozone production when it coincides and interacts with certain air sheds and existing emission sources in particular air sheds. So this is something we're going to continue to take a look at. The rosy side of this story is we are not violating the ozone standard anywhere in North Carolina, and so our count of consecutive days in attainment continues, but we're very close in the Charlotte area. So one reason I want to just mention that, and we're keeping a very close eye on that. As always, at the end of our Air Quality Committee agenda, you can find the links to the data. And so that's a resource that's out there for everyone. Next item, on August 29th, the Department of Environmental Quality here in North Carolina, along with the New Mexico Environment Department and the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, jointly submitted a petition to EPA to add 4 specific PFAS compounds to the list of hazardous air pollutants, or HAPs, under Section 112 of the Clean Air Act. Those 4 specific compounds are PFOA, PFOS, PFNA, and Gen X. The information provided in the petition demonstrated that PFAS, and in particular, these 4 compounds, PFOA, PFOS, PFNA, and Gen X, are air pollutants, and through emissions, ambient air concentrations, bioaccumulation, or deposition, these PFAS are known to cause, or may reasonably be anticipated to cause, adverse effects to human health or adverse environmental effects. So listing certain PFAS as HAPs was a centerpiece and is a centerpiece of EPA's PFAS strategic roadmap that they came out with in 2021. While emission controls of PFAS were beyond the scope of the petition, listing PFAS as HAPs, or the petitioner for listing PFAS as HAPs, the petitioning states urged EPA to explore emission control options as it evaluates the petition. In particular, the states encouraged EPA to develop innovative approaches for identifying categories and subcategories of PFAS sources under Clean Air Act Section 112C, and then establishing technology-based emission controls under Clean Air Act Section 112D. Our experiences here in North Carolina show that air emissions well below HAP, or hazardous air pollutant, major source thresholds can result in significant impacts through deposition. Therefore, as EPA advances any regulatory program at the federal level under Section 112 of the Clean Air Act, we feel that strong generally available control technology, or GACT, standards are needed to complement any maximum achievable control technology standards, or MAC standards, for major sources. EPA has 18 months to review and act on the petition, and there's a link to the petition and information in the agenda, or in the materials here for the commission today. On a final note, another area where we are leading the way, you've heard me mention previously that on the topic of fine particulates, or the new PM 2.5 standard, we are preparing an exceptional events demonstration for the days that pushed us over the level of the standard at 2 monitoring sites, demonstrating that there were events out of the control of the state that led to those values being above the level of standard. So that process that we go through per the federal regulations requires that the state submit an initial notification letter to EPA that kind of outlines our plan and kind of kicks off this entire process. And so we submitted that letter yesterday. In some preliminary reviews of that letter, EPA gave us some very positive feedback. In fact, they are likely to use our letter as the new regional and national template for this process that many states will now be using due to the significant impacts of the Canadian wildfires in 2023. So I just wanted to give you that information. More likely than not, at the January AQC meeting, we'll be giving a more robust update on this exceptional events demonstration. Finally, I just want to wrap with a sincere note of appreciation to our staff. We're smaller and less experienced than any time in recent history in the Division of Air Quality, primarily due to funding constraints. We have 23 vacancies currently, but the staff we have are doing a great job. And I think that's really reflected on a lot of the work that the commission sees, but you only see a very small fraction of the overall portfolio of work that we're doing. And just want to say thank you to our dedicated staff. That's all today, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, great. Questions for Director Abrazinskis? Commissioner Yarborough.
Not specific to, every one of them mentions about staff and the funding levels. We expect so much out of these employees and what they're doing, and yet we as a whole don't go out and petition the legislature to fund what they are expected to do. So I'd encourage us to start looking at this as an EMC. And there's 15 of us here that represent a lot of different things. If we expect the kind of work that we keep pushing these folks to do and the deadlines that they do, it's kind of ridiculous for them to get beat up with the staffing. They cannot compete. I'm experienced with this because of where I used to work. We had the same issues. When got rid of the health insurance petitions and they've got pension changes, it used to be that a state employee understood that if he worked long enough, he'd take a less money because of what he would have in retirement. Those days are over. So we're going to have to be competitive if we're going to expect these folks to do what they want to do. I mean, what we expect them to do. So I would really encourage the chair and this group to come out with some petitions or some recommendations or something to go to the legislature and say, if you can't expect perfection when you're down 23, 25, 15%, and you cannot compete. One thing I have learned in working with the Department of Agriculture is if you have to take somebody that nobody else wanted, that's one you can't get rid of. I'll leave it at that.
Well, let me say this. I do take your comment and we will move. And
I wish you hadn't ended on that.
let me spin this a little bit different way. We've got a lot of people here in the private sector, right? But I look around the table, we've got former DEQ employees and division directors and above. We've got former ag senior people here. We've got former AG's office person here. We got former federal government person here. We've got university professionals here. So you guys are all familiar with the public sector and how that works and staffing and shortfalls. So I would just say, for Commissioner Yarborough's point is, this commission should appreciate it by the number of people we have that have dealt with that through their career. So I do think there's some opportunities we can do, and we can do a better job of helping on all fronts. So good comment taken. And Mike, your group has always done good work, and I like to see your Title V numbers, but again, I know you know the challenges. You lose senior people, you've got to keep that going, but you've always done good work in your division, so thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your comments, Commissioner Yarborough. Appreciate it.
Thank you for what you do.
I want to thank too, at this point, all the division directors. I know this is something we did start doing years ago, but it takes time to put those director comments up on the website and develop them. But not only for this commission, but for the public. I mean, that's at one spot. If nobody can hear this meeting, they can still go to the site and read it and get a pretty good snapshot of the 4 or 5, 6 most important things we're doing. So I really appreciate the time it takes y'all to do that and put it up. I think it's a big value to not just the EMC, but the public as well. So thank you for that. No other comments, questions for staff or for directors. Let me go down the line. And last time I went to Commissioner Yarborough first. So I'm gonna go to Commissioner Bailey first, but let's do Commissioner, any kind of comments, and I'll let committee chairs give their brief updates as we go around. So of anything that's not been covered already. So Commissioner Bailey, any commissioner comments?
I just want to thank everybody for all the hard work they do. I saw that a lot of the commissioners have put quite a bit of time into this. And of course, the staff always works very hard. So I think we're making progress on all kinds of issues. And I appreciate working with all of you qualified professionals.
Thank you. Mr. Bumgarner, comments?
Yes, sir. I usually kind of blow past this one because I realize everybody wants to leave, but I do have some comments. Today is the 1-year anniversary that several of us have been on this commission. And I thought it was a good time to reflect on a little bit of the past year. We began last September in kind of a strange meeting at the coast. And some of us, like Commissioner Ellison and Commissioner Gibson, and I was sworn in at the same time. And we took an oath to, that I really hold dear, and honor that oath to the state and our great country. Like many of the commissioners at the time, we began and set on a quest to really learn and engage as much as possible as we could in this process. My second meeting actually on the commission, I got some new responsibilities, signed a wetland assignment and vice chair of groundwater committee, and got on the water quality committee. Through this past year, I've done my best to serve these roles and take that oath that we took very dearly, and try to ask the hard questions, and which I feel like is our responsibility, and get to the bottom of issues before us as commissioners. So, like I said, we dove in, asked the questions, but I thought it was kind of strange that the more we ask questions and ask about the issues, and the more we tried to understand and inform positions, the more the permeation of what I'm going to call council culture to try to stop some speech and our discussion permeated. Let me see, over the past year, for the mere reason of wanting to actually read and understand documents that I, as a committee member and vice chair of a committee, myself and others in the committee were chastised in the media, were accused of stalling, accused of colluding with people that at the time I didn't even know, had letters written by the secretary that were supposed to be a disappointment, accused of wanting to see body bags in one media article, and accused by another commissioner of dereliction of duty, just for wanting to understand what we were voting on. I think that was pretty weird. It was a weird ride this past year, right, Commissioner Reardon? All because myself and others on this commission wanted to understand and debate the issues in full of what we were voting on. We didn't let the council culture stand in our way. As evidence, just yesterday, we passed out of committee and into this body today, and out of this body actually, 2L groundwater rules. That happened within 2 meetings after the department was up front, provided us written regulatory impact analysis so that we could get with our own 2 eyes and understand what we were reading, what was before this body to be voted on. Couple quick takeaways and I'll quit, Mr. Chairman. When issues are pushed too hard, too fast, there's always a backstory and a reason. While I'm not sure of the backstory over the past year, there's some good indications. Some advice to pass on. If you push too hard, too fast, someone's going to question the motives and ask why. Instead of trashing those attempting to understand, take a moment and work through the issues. You just might get to the same end point faster. Secondly, the more you try to counsel voices and opinions, the more you can expect some pushback. Debate is not dereliction of duty. It is the purpose of this body to debate. If the body is just to approve everything DEQ pushes forward without debate and full understanding of the issues at hand, then I and many other commissioners on many other commissioners have just wasted time and honestly a lot of vacation time from good paying jobs that support our families. So I challenge each of us as commissioners, including DEQ, let's work together to find common ground. Leave the insults alone, work together on solutions. That's our job, to find the right solutions for this state within the purview of this commission. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Carter.
Yes, sir. Just a quick report on the Air Quality Committee yesterday. You've already seen half of what we did. We had 2 action items. I'll mention the second one first, which was the report on the quality control measures for Title V air permit processing, which we recommended, and of course the commission approved unanimously today. Second action item is a request that'll come to the commission in November to go to public comment on revisions to permit review timelines and definitions pursuant to some session law changes. Again, we approved that unanimously, and we'll see that in November. Beyond that, oh, and certainly want to thank Director Representative and his staff. They did a great job, as you saw this morning with Deputy Director Hartsfield's report. Just add one other set of comments, I guess, relative to this delegation matter. I think Commissioner Lyerly has accurately described it. It does look like a lawsuit waiting to happen. It certainly is almost is drafted that way. I find it interesting because, well, first of all, it's extensively researched, but I found a number of factual inaccuracies in it. And I guess I would respond to Commissioner Bailey's question about timelines. In some discussion yesterday, I'm given to understand that EPA has had, or has, not had, but has a de-delegation petitions less pending for years. In one case, maybe 9 years. And then I heard 30 years. I'm not sure about the accuracy of that, but I think that's probably not unlikely here. But I guess the final point I would make on this whole thing is I'm not sure the folks who filed this thing have entirely thought this thing through, because if, in fact, they really got the remedy they're asking for here and EPA de-delegated the program, I don't know who's going to issue permits in this state. EPA has no capability to do that. They have no permit writers, no nothing. And I did point out to Director Rogers yesterday that it at least would solve his staffing problem, because he would no longer need permit writers. So unless EPA was going to go out and hire them all and spend several years getting the program up, the state would be dead in the water as far as NPDES permitting. So I guess it'll be interesting to see how this thing goes from here. And I'll just leave it at that.
Commissioner Duhigg.
Thank you. Permissions Committee number 2 will meet hopefully 10 minutes after this meeting adjourns.
Any other comments, Commissioner Duhigg?
No.
Do you want to take a break for lunch from that committee, or do you want to put a
No.
time on it?
It's just one case.
One case, okay. Mr. Ellis.
There was no previous discussion with Commissioner Baumgartner as far as closing remarks, but there are similarities. The Department of Environmental Quality, led by the Secretary, has repeatedly and publicly admonished this commission over the pace at which we are prosecuting the adoption of surface water rules for PFAS. The department's criticisms have been extended by the media to include baseless public ad hominem attacks on several members. At yesterday's Water Quality Committee meeting, it was clearly demonstrated that, in fact, the department has failed miserably and on multiple fronts to conduct adequate analyses and to provide the commission with the defensible justifications and supporting bases that the commission needs for responsible rulemaking. Committee concerns have been provided to the department on multiple occasions. The department leadership, not the staff, but the leadership, has demonstrated an inability and or unwillingness to adequately address the committee's concerns. I suggest that a more technically informed and cooperative engagement by the department will help the commission execute its duties. Specifically, I recommend the department avail itself of the full depth and breadth of the technical expertise across the department, or to seek outside expertise where appropriate. The bottom line is we're going to get this done sooner if we work together, or later. It's up to the department. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ellison. Commissioner King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick wrap up of yesterday's committee meeting on water quality. The TARPAM was an action item. John Heisman and the association in reference to TARPAM nutrient study strategy adopted by EMC in 2001, readopted with revisions in 2020, and the agreement expiring in 2025. They worked really hard to get this done. It has been on the docket for quite some time, and they worked it out, and my kudos to both the department and the association for getting that. That was passed yesterday to move this to the EMC. Hopefully we can get it on the docket in November, Mr. Chairman, and move that off the table. The other item that came before the committee yesterday was about a 2.5 hour episode on PFAS. The RIA and the fiscal note on PFAS, questions and answers, over 100 of those. And they were presented yesterday, and I really thanked Tim Bumgardner, Commissioner Bumgardner, for being the question manager on that piece and getting through it. And as we got through that, or dug deeper into the RIA for the committee, or for this commission, the committee came up with 2 areas that were really concerning. One was food in the RIA, several pages, several links. But the question is what FDA or USDA is doing about the PFAS on the national level. What's the FDA doing? So there was a motion on the floor that the FDA, I'll read it to you. The reference was the EMC Water Quality Committee does not accept nor take any action related to the RIA benefits category, the human health benefits, also cited as human health beyond DW in a table 20 or in Appendix F in the section titled Estimated Exposure to Food Contaminating PFAS in North Carolina, until the members of the EMC meet with FDA and receive a written response that the information related to food in the United States and North Carolina is accurate. So that motion was on the table to be voted on, and it passed. Then we got into the pollution prevention strategies, as you might say, is looking at ways this pollution could be monitored and the sources reduced. So we got into, Mr. Chairman and commission members, we got into monitoring and source reduction. With that, a motion went on the floor to direct DEQ to develop a draft rule and regulatory impact analysis, RIA, fiscal note, establishing monitoring for every industrial and NPDES permit and require PFAS source reduction plans as part of every industrial and SIU, this significant industrial users, municipal pretreatment plans. So that were 2 motions that were made yesterday in the committee. And with that, the takeaway is that we will be getting with Director Rogers and take that information next week and get moving on those 2 areas. So we'll do that ASAP and moving these items forward. And as we've all listened and the committee has gone over and over and over, we want to regulate just not 1.4 dioxin. We want to regulate PFAS. And that's a very important piece. In fact, right now is probably the most important that we give that our full attention. But we're doing it the right way, Mr. Chairman, and the committee thinks so. Thanks.
Thank you,
so
Commissioner
much.
Keenan.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you for the work of your and Commissioner Ellison's committee yesterday. Thank you. Commissioner Lyerly.
No comment.
Commissioner Gibson.
No comment, except to again thank the DEQ staff and actually support the idea that we could advocate for better support for DEQ staff, especially since the cost of living cost of housing in Raleigh has more than doubled in the last decade.
Great
And I
place to
don't-
live. Isn't it?
Yeah,
They're finally figuring it out. Kinda
That's
like-
right.
Commissioner Reardon, any comments or committee report from you that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, I'll keep it brief, but I do want to thank the staff. You know, they really turned around a lot of documents in a hurry to make sure that we were able to vote on moving PFAS forward yesterday. Really proud of the work of the committee members and the engagement that they provided in that, and was able to successfully make a motion to move forward to the EMC, the proposed PFAS levels for groundwater. And obviously today we voted in this committee to send it forward to public comment. I think that really reflects the desire and the will of the committee, but do so in a very scientific and technologically based way that we feel we've been responsible in that body of work. I will only add on that I echo the comments of Commissioner Bumgardner and Commissioner Ellison in this body of work, we have to have professional decorum. And that's respect for each other and respect for what we do as a committee. Not only sitting around this room, but the directors and their members of staff, but also even the professional staff in this department. And I hope that from this point forward, we can move in that direction. I know that's surely what I want, having worked in government and been on commissions for 40-some years. You have to have a professional decorum. You may not always agree on everything, and that's okay. Good dialogue is a wonderful thing to have. Pragmatic dialogue is a great thing. In many cases, you'll end up with a better product because of that dialogue than groupthink. But it does not mean that you chastise, demonize others and do so in a public way. And so I hope we can have some professional decorum going forward. That's my final comment.
Mr. Tweedy.
I'll just add a little bit. I had more to say, but Commissioners Baumgartner and Reardon kind of hit on it, so I think I could shorten it down. Just thinking about assigning motives and intentions, to others. I've seen that's been expressed here, of taking offense at having someone question your motives and intentions. And I have seen that go in both directions, in all directions in the time that I've been here. We got to be very careful to avoid that. It sows distrust and it creates a environment where we can't work collaboratively. And maybe as more importantly, we can't hear the valid points that the others are making. And I feel like I would say that went both directions yesterday, in my opinion. I'll end on a positive and I'll build off what Commissioner Baumgartner said again as well. I've been here a little over a year, one extra meeting now, and we've agreed on and worked collaboratively through a heck of a lot more than we've disagreed on. So let's try to build on that. Let's focus on the positive, not get sucked down into the negative and the disagreements. That's it.
Thank you. Commissioner Weiss, from your committee or your own comments?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Solomon. The Water Allocation Committee did meet yesterday, and the department has received its, or as a commission, we've received our third request for an interbasin transfer that are in process now. I think that goes to somewhat to Commissioner Gibson's point about how the state is growing. A lot of these communities need water. So those are going to be some big projects coming down the line for this commission to evaluate and shepherd through the public notice and comment and evaluation. Having said that, I appreciate Commissioner Yarborough's acknowledgement that the work that we as a commission have been pressing staff to do and perform. And I appreciate how staff has stepped up and tried to be very responsive to those many, many requests. I think we've seen some forward movement on some of the most important environmental issues in this state. So thank you to staff, and look forward to going forward with this commission.
Thank you. Commissioner Yarborough.
Yes, yesterday we had our first NPDS meeting, and it was basically an informational meeting, and that's exactly what we'll be doing from now on. I don't know how often we'll meet. It's obvious that there's some things that happened yesterday that we need to obviously look at. I think it's good to know what the permits are that come in, the numbers. It's also good to know what kind of public comments when you have those and public hearings. I think that's very helpful for the EMC to know what's actually going out there. I think we learned yesterday that, and as I mentioned again this morning, about the permit delegation from EMC to the DEQ. So we are tied together on this. So I think it's something that we have to look at. I had a question yesterday. I'd like to know myself, because I've got a lot to learn on that, is what role does the EMC have? So I think it's something that we need to consider. We worked with the Division of Water Resources yesterday. Toby will be looking at Demler at another point to look at your permits. I know you have several as well. And so I think it's going to be helpful on that. And again, I echo the rest of the group. I'm on my first year here after this meeting, and I've been on a lot of commissions and been a lot of different things. And I've never been sued twice within the whole time I've done it. I've spent my whole career trying to stay out of court. It seemed like I got in it by being appointed to this commission. But anyway, we're gonna make this work, but we can work through it. I know we can. That's what you have to have, is a positive attitude, and be just like a ball game. You don't have to always win, but you need to always play. And that's the way I live my life. And I appreciate what you do as a staff and all the commissioners coming to this thing and putting up with me is worth a lot. Thanks a lot.
Commissioner Vice Chair Duggan.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to thank staff for all the hard work that they put in for not only just these meetings, but on a daily basis. I echo Commissioner Yarborough's comments about going out there and petitioning and asking fellow commissioners to petition those that you know in the legislature to provide adequate funding for this group. It's an important group that needs the attention. I'd also echo the comments of my fellow commissioners about the importance of working in a collaboratory fashion. I think it's necessary. It's needed in order to benefit the citizens of the state of North Carolina. Yes, at times debate gets heated, but it's important to, at the end of the day, work for the residents. And I think we all want that, right? We all want to work for the residents and the citizens of this state. I do want to thank council for working on the bylaws and assisting us with those bylaws and assisting us with the public records requests. We're going to continue to work on those bylaws, hopefully bring some more information to the full commission regarding those bylaws at the November meeting, maybe the January meeting, but we're working on revising the bylaws based upon some discussions we had and that. Always thank Lois for her hard work on the minutes and getting those minutes to me. I'd like to thank Commissioner Carter for agreeing to step in my place for the Salisbury water supply reclassification hearing on October 10th. That allows me to attend my son's senior night. So I'm not sure how happy he is, but I'm happy to be.
Perfectly happy.
Thank you, thank you. And I'm sorry I will miss the good barbecue that you suggest is up that way.
Try again.
That's right. And the last thing I'll say is go Bills.
So I was trying to get out of here a little earlier, but I guess I'll go with a few remarks that maybe I hadn't planned. The last time I was chair, I met with Acting Secretary Ross and then former Secretary Michael Regan to talk about really how I carried on at the pleasure of the current governor, especially in an environment where House and Senate were going to be poised against the current administration. And I gave them three things back then, and I won't beat them all three to death, but I said, if you're looking for a chairman, there's three things I'll do. I'll listen to all sides. We'll figure out a way to have, it doesn't hurt us to listen. We'll bring in people to do presentations wherever they're from. We'll listen to everybody. Two, will be as evidence-based as possible. We don't need to speculate. We don't anticipate the sky's falling. We need to look at what we actually see out there. And third, look for me to run issues and get votes where we have agreement. And that's the third part, and I think Commissioner Tweedy has talked about that. We agree on a lot more than we disagree on. And if we're trying to ram things down people's throat or run over people, it's because we don't have agreement. The issue's not ripe yet. And I was clear about that 8 years ago. I'm clear about that today. I talked a lot more about that kind of thing last time I was chairman. Haven't really talked to you guys about it. But in everything we do, we're going to hear debates. And if you guys haven't figured out, you all have a lot of strong opinions and personalities, right? And so we're going to listen to those. We're going to try to mold those together. But at the end of the day, we're going to figure out what we can all agree on. And that's probably the right thing. And that may feel incremental at times, and it may feel hugely out front at times. But we're going to find the things we agree on. And that's what we're going to try to keep moving. And that's how we keep progress going for the state. because I still believe we got one of the best state in the country. And I think people's quality of life is the best in the country. And so I don't think we have big differences of opinion on the things that matter most. And so I've said that before. I'll say that again. If you do any research on me at all, you'll see that everywhere. We'll have hard debate, but at the end of the day, we'll figure out ways we agree and then we'll move on. And then later on, we'll make another decision. So I think focus on that. If we can all focus on that, we'll be much better off. And I think we'll continue to make progress. And I do think, as I reflected, it's ironic, some people were reflecting on the past year. I was reflecting on that last night after another good set of debates yesterday. You know, last December, we had the first orientation for EMC that we had for a year. I did that previously, and we did that now. And I remember at the time, half of you guys were less than a year with the EMC. And I was just reflecting last night as I got ready for today a little bit about how far we have come. And I hate to say seasoned, but you guys have got a lot of experience. You newer people have got a lot of experience in the last 8 or 9 months. And I think that's a good thing, because that was one of the goals that I had going into this year, is get everybody oriented to play on some of the experience we had, but also to bring everybody up to where by the end of this year, 1 year later after December, we were a good commission. And, you know, I think at times those debates will get us strained, but I do think we're a great commission. And I think every one of you guys has expertise, experience, and judgment that we all need to hear and have. So it's a pleasure. It is indeed a pleasure to try to be the chairman and try to bring us all together. And we're going to keep doing that, but it is a pleasure to serve with each and every one of you. And I've re-echo what Commissioner Vice Chair Duggan said. It's a commissioner to work with Counselor Young too. She's come a long way in a couple meetings, and I've really enjoyed having the depth of bench of having her and Sarah and Philip all with the AG's office now to come to bear for it. So it's a very strong commission now, and we've got a lot of good things we've done and a lot more we're going to do. So with that, if there's no other comments, I will end it there. And thank you all again for all your hard work. You guys have worked hard this summer, and I appreciate everything everybody's done. So we're adjourned.